Namaste and greetings. I, Remat Arora, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all at IMPRI, hashtag Web Policy Learning. Today, we are gathered here for day 3 of Feminism, Theory and Praxis, a 3-day immersive online certificate training. In the last day of this 3-day program, which is dedicated to understanding feminist movements, intersectionality, the pivotal role of feminism in addressing global challenges, and strategies for gender-inclusive policy making. On day 3, we will be joined by Professor Indira Ramarao ji discussing discourses on feminism in gender research in the mother tongue with special reference to Kannada, Dr. Vahida Nainar ji with an address on feminist foreign policy, and Ms. Farida Akhter ji discussing ecofeminism. The chair for the program is Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, visiting distinguished professor at IMPRI. The conveners for this course are Dr. Simmi Mehta, CEO and editorial director at IMPRI, and Dr. Arjun Kumar, director at IMPRI. Proceeding further, I welcome all the participants to this enlightening deliberation and thank you for being interested and putting your time, energy, and effort into understanding the pivotal role of feminism in addressing global challenges, while helping us to bring together the practitioners and participants through this course for impactful policy research and action. Now, without any further ado, let us start our program. It is my honor and privilege to invite the chair for the program, Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, to start the program with her opening chair remarks. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Ramat. And welcome Dr. Indira Ramarao, Dr. Vahida Nainar, Ms. Farida Akhter, Dr. Leena Pujari, and the esteemed participants for the third day of this online International Winter School program. Thank you, respected Dr. Arjun Kumar, Simi Mehta, Ms. Ashtaba, Ms. Remat Arora, Ms. Priyanka Negi, Ms. Vithita, Mr. Satyam Tripathi, and Ms. Vaishali Singh, the whole team which has worked so hard to put this program together, which has really been extremely inspiring, and it has given us a lot of energy. We have already completed 6 sessions, and what came out from various resource persons lectures, as well as the discussions that followed these lectures, were that hand in hand with feminist theory is feminist activism, and the feminist praxis is reflective. It empowers the participants, and also it is a political practice. So it's the politicization that happens in the course of feminist theorization and praxis is very important. The day 1 was marked by discussion on nuances of feminist epistemology, a critique of positivism, and how feminist epistemology is rested on the experiential account and women's experiences or experiences of the marginalized communities are extremely important in theorization. It's a grounded theory. In intersectional feminism, about which Dr. Linda Lane enlightened us. She gave a full worldview of intersectionalism in a different geopolitical and geographical context, and she brought in the analytical categories of feminism's feminist theorization marked by intersectional perspective, which is defined by your social location in terms of caste, class, race, ethnicity, religion, and language and color of your skin, and how this sensitivity to the privileges which your social location provides and the marginalization, I think it's is very important to define the strategies and tactics of feminist praxis. Dr. Shewli Kumar's lecture on post-colonial feminism was also extremely enlightening, where she talked about how post-colonial feminism challenged sisterhood is powerful, the slogan of the white feminists who enjoy the privileges of white patriarchy. And the post-colonialism, how does it distort the construction of womanhood in the developing world, in the third world, where women are perceived more as a victim, not as agent. She also brought in the discussion on Orientalism by Edward Said, and how Orientalism also sees things in terms of black and white. There is so much of layering that within Oriental society also there's class oppression, there are politically authoritarian regimes are there, and their women's status in the post-colonial society, though more oppressive, but women are also fighting back collectively, that emerged. And the question of solidarity became very important. And it ended with the transnational solidarity that, okay, we know that women's predicament and women's life situation, life worlds are different in different geographical location and different in North and in South. But solidarity is the principle on which we would, we collectively try to dismantle patriarchy, learn from each other's success stories. The small narratives are equally important. Day 2, where I spoke on trends in feminism, the whole 200 years of history of feminism, some of the glimpses of feminism that we Bhakti movement in India and Mary Wollstonecraft's important work on subjection of women, which also resulted in a lot of thinking about the liberal feminism and women's being treated as citizen, as an individual, and constitutional equality. And after that, over last 200 years, all different trends of feminism and how they provide a worldview or a perspective. And there are no watertight compartments in these different trends. We learn a lot from each other, and the goal of these various trends is to fight against patriarchal control over women's lives, women's sexuality, fertility, labor, and women's existence. After that, we had a discussion on MENA region by Dr. Chitra Sinha, which was an extremely important, because that is the one region which is neglected. There is a very stereotypical understanding about women in Middle East and North Africa. So her profile of political economy of MENA region, and within that locating women's role in the developmental process, whether in work participation or in the family life or the cultural upbringing. And the cultural setup in which women from the MENA region, nearly 42 countries are there. Each country has its own different history and cultural legacy. So you can't put them in one bracket. That's what she said. And how the churning is taking place. Though media doesn't, mainstream media or mainstream academia has not written much, but she also talked about the work of Nawal Sadawi and the work of Fatima Marnisi. We forgot, but I think it's also very important to here mention the work of Denis Kandioti, who has done massive work on deconstructing patriarchy in the MENA region. Then we had a last presentation was by Feminism and Legal Activism by Professor Saumya Uma. Extremely systematically, she took care of the conceptual and operational biases within the legal provision. How many of them have resulted as a result of the collective struggle of women's movement. She also talked about the judicial activism, and she said that once you have laws, what all you have to do even to get the implementation of these laws done. And she also said the overarching concern about patriarchal bias within the laws, both in terms of conceptualization, the language which is used, and also the criminal justice system, how it responds to when it comes to implementation of this law. And now today is our last day. Again, we have a veteran feminist, Dr. Indira Ramarao, Dr. Vahida Nainar, and Ms. Farida Akhter. And we are going to have a complete scenario about the contribution of feminism in terms of theorization and praxis. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm now delighted to call upon Professor Indira Ramarao ji, Professor of Eminence, School of Social Sciences, MS Ramarao University of Applied Sciences, Bangalore, for an address on discourses on feminism in gender research in the mother tongue with special references to Kannada. Over to you, ma'am. We welcome you.
Thank you so much, Professor Vibhuti Patel, Dr. Shewli Kumar, and all my friends from IMPRI, Dr. Leena Pujari, and all my co-panelists and all the participants. As always, it's a pleasure to be part of the IMPRI experience, as I call it. And today, I have chosen to speak on a topic on which there isn't much written material available. Of course, there are a number of works on feminism, no, though not directly in Kannada. But I thought that having one of the earliest feminist traditions in writing, it's kind of not out of context to speak on how we bring in feminism into the researches that we are, undertaking in Kannada language. So I'll just give a brief. I really, after listening to Professor Vibhuti Patel, I really don't know whether I have anything to say, but surely I'll just make an attempt and will be happy to answer questions based on whatever material is available with me and what I know. The first thing is I was inspired to speak on this because, there is a lot of research work, writing that is now going on in the universities and colleges for the PhD program in Kannada language. For example, in humanities and social sciences especially, I should say, I am subject to correction, but I'm sure that there are very few, theses that are being written in English now. So it's all Kannada. Well, it's fine. And in my own department, the Department of Sociology at the University of Mysore, where I taught for more than 4 decades, I was just trying to find out. And I learned that, see, for example, during the last 5 years, there have been 40% of the thesis or 40% of the research studies have been on gender. So it always kind of comes to my mind, what kind of context are we using in order to understand and present our study results or findings? Now, before I go into other details, I would like to first go back to the question that often came up even when I started working on gender. And I have even read that is it necessary to always present, not that I am saying that feminist interpretations are not important, but one of the first questions that confronted us was, is it important to present your findings? Is it all important always to search for answers to your questions in the context of a feminist theory? Because when some of our teachers said, when you talk of women, what are important are narratives, experiences, lived in experiences. So it's not necessary that you always put your thoughts, your writings, your findings in the context of a theory. Well, it's very important to understand narratives. It's very important to listen to lived in experiences. But I believe, it's my belief, that feminism is not something that just doesn't come from somewhere. I understand that feminism is born out of our lived in experiences. And, so it's not really necessary to get into an argument about whether a feminist theory is necessary to present your findings. I believe that if you take a very critical, serious look at different genres of writing, I can speak of Kannada language itself, be it autobiographies, poetry, columns, novels, which many of our writers have written, there are, undercurrents of feminism. So my first point is that, well, I know that also one thing that I have understood is that there is not just one feminism, but there are feminisms, as we are saying these days. So the first point that I like to make is that theory is not something that comes from nowhere. No, and also that it's not an isolated block of thoughts. Feminist theory or feminism, according to me, is something that's born out of the lived experiences of people, and it is just asking questions. Feminism is about asking questions, and the Kannada literary tradition goes as far as back as the 12th century, when Akka Mahadevi, the Sharana poetess as she was called, wrote her vachanas. Vachanas are written in Kannada in a language that people understand. And she raised certain questions about patriarchy, about caste hegemony, and gender stereotypes. Now, it's true that these concepts may not have been used by her or writers, or the simple women who spoke of what you, many times we would call them, after all, what is so great about it? This is what everybody does. But then, even in talking about certain day-to-day experiences, as way back as in 12th century, in Kannada language, there are questions which are feminist in framework, which our writers who wrote in very simple language, which could be understood by everybody, put. So my argument here is that the question that I want to raise, and which always bothers me, if I may say so, is to what extent are theses or research being done in Kannada, in different academic institutions, using the feminist, what should I say, literature, or the feminist thoughts that are available in the writings of many of our writers. Now, the second point I just wanted to raise is, what do I mean by gender research? What did I have in mind when I said gender research? I don't think I need to go on a very deep explanations, but what I had in mind, I just would like to clarify that research that focuses on gender and related themes. So as I told you, just to go back, I know that in my department in the University of Mysore, sociology for that matter, 40% of the research work that has been done in the last 5 years has gender as the theme. But what I have noticed is that most of the studies are descriptive. It is not that I'm undermining the importance of descriptive research. It is important to talk of, data, collect information from people and then say. But what I remember, my own teacher telling me more than 35 years ago, see, research is not just about, not just about figures. He said, learn to ask some focused questions and then try to locate the answers. You need not have 20 objectives, 10 objectives, but just ask some 3 very relevant questions and keep on going further to say, why this? Why not that? And since I was working on women, just don't say so many women are there and so many men are there. I'm not saying that quantitative data is unimportant. But then he said, have you ever thought of asking why so many women and why so many men? So I think feminism, even not expressed in terms of feminist terminology, if I may use that word, has, as it is available in many of our writings, has answers to these questions. So basically, gender research, which focuses on women, study of women in this group, study of women in that group, study of women in this institution, study of women in that institution. Well, it's not that it is not necessary, but I think that to raise specific questions, I can say for certain that many of these are pure descriptions of the situations that they have studied and have not tried to put it in a context, of taking further and finding out why this and why not that. Because that can be done, if I may say so, only when we read. And why there is, and so now coming to another point, you see, the moment you talk of feminism, there are many who write in the mother tongue, that is in Kannada language, who say, oh, feminism is a Western concept. Feminism, well, is not for us Kannada readers and writers. No, I thoroughly disagree with that. You see, there are leanings towards feminism in many Kannada writings, and I gave you the example of Akka Mahadevi, who is considered the first feminist. I mean, you can have arguments on this. The first feminist of Karnataka, and I was one of the earliest feminists of this country. It doesn't matter in which language she wrote. She wrote in Kannada, and many of her works, vachanas, have been translated into English. So you can, actually what you require is a translingual approach, if I may use that word. Generally, many people have the tendency to look for, inspiration, to look for what you call as source material only in the language in which they are writing. But that should not be the case. And also we are confined to our subjects. You see, when you talk of Akka Mahadevi, I myself have heard people say, oh, but they study her in literature. What does sociology have to do with her? I would say there is so much sociology in her writings. There is so much politics. There is gender inequality. There is protest against caste system. And so we are kind of using this argument, this wrong thought process, that for us to refer to some theory, for us to quote some theory, it has to be available in that nomenclature only in our language and in our discipline. I think that feminism, to talk of feminism as a theory, we have to go beyond this thought, and that has been my experience. So there are several genres of Kannada literature where, you see, there are very vociferous arguments against gender inequality. Now, the ways in which they are expressed may be different. Often, I have always said this, when our own students write, many times we say, don't tell me stories. I don't want to listen to stories. Come to the point. Yeah, but stories are important. When telling her story of how she rebelled against orthodoxy, how she questioned stereotypes, how she rejected the institutions which kind of ghettoized women in their roles. Akka Mahadevi was a feminist who asks multiple questions on why women should live a certain type of life. Then they take the argument further and say, no, she was not a feminist. You see, she was a great believer in the Lord Channamallikarjuna, in whom she believed. So they look at her only as a spiritual kind of a person. And where is feminism? They say, no. In rejecting institutions which tried to kind of seclude women, which tried to confine women to certain institutions, especially family and marriage, in rejecting these institutions and in setting out on her own in search of the God in which she believed, Akka Mahadevi set a trend for feminist thinking when she said that women must have the right of choice, about which we are talking so much today. But my own concern is how much of this gender research that is being done in disciplines across Kannada language are using her writings. Of course, there are two groups in our system who are talking about gender. One group consists of the people in what is called the world of literature, writers, teachers in departments of English and Kannada, writers who are not necessarily in the university setup, but who are writing extensively in Kannada language and who have raised very critical questions about all kinds of inequality. So this is one group that is engaged in questions of gender. The other group, of course, is I'm talking about those who are working on gender in Kannada language. The one group is, I said, people in the area of literature, writers, teachers, etc., as I've already said. The other group, of course, consists of teachers of social sciences and, of course, students who are working on gender. But I will say that a lot of research that is being done in the field of social sciences on the gender question is descriptive. There are only few, and I can't really give the numbers because all that work is not available with me, but surely from what I know, from what I have gathered, I would say that a lot of that research is very descriptive, is not raising those critical questions, nor is it going beyond the discipline boundaries to peruse different forms of writings. So I don't have very big arguments today, but all I would like to say is that we must, to feminism in Kannada, you know, uh, is it's very important to understand that we have to do two things. If we have to see the nuances of feminism in writings, which are not necessarily essentially academic in profile, one is that we have to go beyond one's own language. And also we have to go beyond one's own literature. And also if we want to bring feminism into Kannada research, gender research in mother tongue, in Kannada language, of which I am specifically concentrating on today, it's important, as one writer says, to study across cultures. We often do not bring into our work, the entire gamut of folk literary tradition that is available in our own language. The moment we talk of folk traditions, we say, no, that is not my subject. It is for the folklore department to study, to work. So unless we go across cultures, across disciplines, across languages, it's not possible to get a feel of feminism in our language. Of course, there are a few writers who have written about the feminist schools of thought from the West. They have written it in Kannada. They have also brought out glossaries, and they have brought out translation equivalents on feminist terminology. They've translated it from English to Kannada. But then that is itself not enough. I think that to understand the roots of feminism in our culture and cultures of others, in English language and in other languages, especially in our mother tongue, it is very important to go beyond, as I said, disciplines. Unless you are transdisciplinary, translingual, transcultural, it's not possible to get the feel. So all I would like to say is that feminism, as we know, and I'm sure you have had so many illustrious lectures that I won't go back into that again. But all I can say is feminism is, again, not to repeat, but I would just say once, asking questions. And this tradition of asking questions on challenging and breaking gender hegemony happened more than 8-10 centuries ago in Kannada language itself. But the more important thing is how many people who are working on gender as a subject of their research are actually going back to these literary forms, the different genres of literature, to understand life. Because basically the way in which one expresses may be different from one discipline to the other, but the truth lies in the fact that in questioning hierarchies of various kinds, gender hierarchies were also questioned by them. So I would say that it is important, and I would consider translations as a very important facet of taking knowledge in the mother tongue to other languages. And I think we have a very rich translation culture in Kannada language. because it's one of the languages where many books that question gender inequality or caste inequality have been translated into English. Excellent books, classics, as well as other forms of writings have been translated into English. Some of them have been translated into multiple languages. So all I would like to say is, as a teacher and a research supervisor, it is important for me, I would talk about myself, to open up my mind to forms of literature where feminism and feminist thoughts and feminist actions are available, and more importantly, open up the minds of our students. So what I have said, may sound a very, I'm one of those persons who just likes to speak from the heart, and I've not put my thoughts in a feminist mold. But all I can say is, to me, feminism is a way of life. And to many of us here, I know that. So it's not just a theory to me. For me, it is a practice. And for me, all of us here who have gathered, because we want to understand how feminism goes beyond, transcends the borders of pure academics. So if you really want to look for feminism, just around yourself and in other cultures, in other languages, and how you can experience it, because there are, some students who come and ask, where can I see feminism? Where can I feel feminism? I am given to understand that it is something outside my life. It's something outside. But feminism, as we all know, it's not just a thing like, but it's a feeling with which we live. And I must say, because I know there are friends here from different states and from different language backgrounds, but all I would like to say, and I'm also not saying that other languages don't have, but since I'm speaking about my mother tongue, I can see that Kannada, I can say before I close, that Kannada is one language which has very, rich feminist traditions and available in all forms of writings. And it's not just limited to academic writing, but when people sing, when they are writing in newspapers, when they are writing books, when they are, what should I say, in folk forms, it's available. So all I would like to say is that at a larger level, as I said, it is important for all those who are involved in supervising research or in doing research to look beyond their own language disciplines. Because there was a time, because some people have asked me, I do a lot of my writing in my language. Some people have asked me, why don't you write only in English? What are you getting by writing in Kannada? This question angers me, because I say, why are you asking me that question? It is important to talk. No, you could have had some couple of more papers. But well, I said, I'm happy doing what I'm doing. This is my belief, not to comment on what you are doing. But don't say, why are you not writing academic? Why are you not doing academics? What makes us think that, when you write in your mother tongue, when you write in a medium which takes your thoughts and to the people, it's, you're doing something that is not important. So I believe that it's very important for us to relate to life, and nothing can be you can't do it better than when you think, when you read, and learn to appreciate what is available in your language. But also, as I said, this tradition of respecting what others have written in any form must be created in academic institutions. And I think I've just shared some of my thoughts with you. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for this enlightening session. I would now like to call Professor Vibhuti Patel ji to give the chair's remarks.
I think Professor Indira Ramarao has brought in a very important question. I think going back to one's root and also understanding things in the your own mother tongue is extremely important. And right from the very beginning of the women's movement in India, we have done that. In fact, the one when at the peak of anti-rape movement, we asked all the feminists across India to share their folk songs and folk tales. And it was woven into a one music ballet, which depicted women's life cycle right from the time she is in her mother's tummy, then birth of a girl child, growing up years, puberty, premarital dreams, marriage, and postmarital problems. And we ended it with the Subramaniam Bharati's Kumi. So I think there are 14 languages of India, the folk songs from 14 languages. They were woven into one story, which was a universal story of Indian women, of discrimination in the family, double standards of sexual morality, domestic violence, women coming together and fighting against this kind of oppressive regime. And it was such an empowering experience. It took us collectively 1 year to get all these things. Another very good work which Seb Sparrow has done, Dr. C.S. Lakshmi, where she asked, reaching out, she asked all the women's groups to send the proverbs of their region. And then the English translation of that proverb was converted into a calendar. And that also brought in a message that there is a universality of women's experiences. We also have another, I think Dr. Indira also must have contributed, the 2 volumes we have, Women's Writings in India from 600 BC to the present, where more than 40 women's studies scholars with feminist commitment came together, and they brought in, they first of all researched and found out the stories and folk tales and folklores and writings and vachanas, and in Maharashtra they call abhanga, and all these and they were translated into English. And now I think in the English across the disciplines, this book has been core top, this, whether it's in women's studies or in English literature, these women's writings have been very important. The whole thing is, it gives you sense of her story, that we always talk about history, where men are powerful men, they fight with each other, and there are territorial wars for land and property and women. That is the way we are taught the history. But how day-to-day lived experiences of women, the labor processes, the kind of relationship that you, because gender is relational, and how this is played out in a different cultural context, it's extremely important. So I think this is a very, I'm sure this lecture by Professor Indira Ramarao, who just doesn't say that we should work in regional languages in terms of latitude, but she has herself done it. Extensive translation, writing a column, reaching out to quote unquote ordinary women, because feminism, one allegation on feminism is that of elitism. So transcending elitism and reaching out to more and more women, and say that this is our legacy. This is the tradition that in which we have grown, and we have to continue this legacy. Is a very empowering experience. Thank you. You brought in this aspect of feminism, Professor Indira Ramarao. Yeah, I think there'll be many questions. We are very active participants. Yeah, Mr. Abel Raj. Yeah, he's there. Yeah.
Thank you. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
It was very interesting that you shifted gears from the global to the contextual and local Indian languages, ma'am, on gender. As you were speaking, you were lamenting that the research, most of it is stopping at the descriptive level. And because when I submitted my research, actually I used case study methods, but I mixed it with grounded theory. So I was thinking, why should we go on from the descriptive thick data, because that is a very good data that is collected. How do you go on and then mixed methods from use case study research, couple it with grounded theory in order to theorize the thick data that has been collected, so that doesn't go waste and stays at a biographical level. That was one thing that I was thinking. Then the other thing is, what about using narrative criticism as a research method, or mixing socio-rhetorical methods for close unpacking of spiritual texts like those of Akkama Devi? I'm hearing about her for the first time, so it's a great learning. I'm going to follow her up. But these methods, socio-rhetoric methods, I don't know if they are in use, but definitely for very close exegetical work on spiritual texts, the vachanas, I'm sure that these methods will be very good. But only thing is, are our research scholar students well versed with these methods in literature? I'm not sure how the field works in Karnataka, but in Tamil Nadu, I'm from Chennai. I don't see a lot of folks well versed in this. That's a question. Yeah. Your comments, please.
Okay. All I would like to say is thank you for raising these very important issues. You're right. But I believe, over a period of time, I have learned that the very purpose of using sources available in if I may use that word, non-academic, platforms is to get out of this mono-theorizing kind of a model. Because even today there are people who believe that if you don't speak or use certain theoretical, theory-inspired language, your work is not, of those, doesn't fit into those academic standards. All I was trying to say is you talked of grounded theory, multi-methods, etc. I think that is the best approach. Rather than begin with the idea that, well, I have to, use this method, this theory, or this kind of format only to go into the field. If I'm whatever my discipline may be, ready to learn as well as unlearn. Often the unlearning takes place from the lived-in experiences of others. I would say that is the best method. And about Akkamahadevi, there are English translations of Akkamahadevi's verses.
Okay.
This is mostly done by, A.K. Ramanujam has had. I mean, of course, how you take that depends upon, but one of the most well-known translations of Akkamahadevi's verses into English is by A.K. Ramanujam, and it's available.
Oh, thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Aparna Lakshmi ji, would you like to ask your question?
Ma'am, it was very enlightening to hear to you. And I write bilingually in Hindi and English, and I realized that the essence of our feelings or our emotions is brought out more in our natural tongue, mother tongue. And because I feel it might be because the lived experience that you say. And in reading about the history of the world and in reading about the experience of other women, like I read about the female genital mutilation, and I wrote when I expressed it in my poem, maybe I could sense how those women would be feeling throughout their lives. So I feel when we are reading about the lived experiences of others, it is also a solidarity or a fraternizing factor for us as well. What do you feel, ma'am?
Yeah, I agree with you.
Thank you
But
so
it's
much.
also important. All I want to say is that not as many people are doing it, shut ourselves off to
Yes.
thoughts that come from other languages, and
Yes.
keep our minds open, as I said, both to learning what is available in other languages. Of course, in the mother tongue, you feel most comfortable. But we also should not forget that our skills of using the language need not necessarily be acquired only by reading, what is written in our mother tongue. So when we say that the more the number of languages I open myself up to, try to understand, try to listen, I think that we are better.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Anita Rao. Yeah.
I'll ask the question. I think ma'am is unable to unmute herself. She's asked that you mentioned a calendar for yesteryear around feminism. Is there a digital portal available that can connect
Yes.
several websites on
Yeah,
Indian
it is
feminism?
www.sparrow. I am writing it on the this thing and the chat box only. Sparrow's knowledge resources are all in public domain. They also bring out videos as well as printed material, and their PDF of all their publications, including Sparrow newsletter, which is also quite exhaustive, and all their calendars and posters are there on the website of sparrow.com. I'm just writing the link of the Sparrow. Yeah. Okay.
So Dipaji, would you like to ask your question? Okay, while ma'am unmutes, then we can move on to Nandini Sahaji.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am, Professor Ramarao, ma'am, for this, extremely important emphasis on local language literature. I'm a teacher of literature. So these days, though I teach, I'm a student and I teach English literature, but we have over the years learned that knowing what's happening around you in your culture, in your language is also very important. But I just had one question. The feminist texts that we read in English from the Western world, do you think translating them into our local languages might help our women fraternity? Would that help? I mean, I'm just trying to understand whether the Western texts on feminist theories or feminism, not just, token documentation of incidents and experiences might help. But theoretically, the theories, feminist theories from the Western world, would it help to translate them, because I'm from the East, into the local language, say Bengali? Would it help? Thank you.
Yeah, I think so. It helps because, first of all, separating feminist thought into Western, Eastern, Kannada, Hindi, English, that itself is not the right approach. Because I'm sure when you read a feminist theory, okay, let say Western feminist theory, whether it is maybe, whatever terminology may be used. See, for example, when you say ecofeminism, there is so much about the environment that is written in, that's happening all around us. So this is something that needs to be done. Only I do not know in Bengali there are books written on feminism in.
I was just thinking, ma'am, but I am not really sure. Though there are a lot of work that's been done by the Women's Studies Center at Jadavpur University, where I teach.
Okay.
But in general, whether there are feminist texts in Bengali, I'll have to find out. But yes, there are a lot of scholars who work under me who are working they write in Bengali and they work on Bengali literature. And they're doing a women-oriented work, feminist work. But
no, in Kannada
feminism,
we do have books that are written on feminist theory in Kannada. Some of them are very few of them, not many are there, but one or two are translations. The others are, based on, they have, of course, drawn the inspiration from those textbooks and they are written. So I think that translating these books is definitely very important. I think the National Translation Mission has a
Yes,
very
ma'am.
major, it's a big project which has taken this work of translation of classics in all disciplines into different languages. We have done it in sociology actually. And so I think, and they have a list of books that have already been prepared. Not all of them, it's a lifetime's work. If you look at the list and the difficulties. But one thing that is, since you have raised a very important point, I just want to say, recently we had a, Mysore Literary Fest where this topic came up for discussion, where we said, what is translation basically about? Is it just, it's not just literary, but it is cultural, contextual.
Yes.
So if that it is done in that context with examples of how we can apply the feminist theory to different local situations, I think that will be a very good contribution
Thank you,
to
ma'am.
understanding
Yes. Thank
In
you.
fact, Sparrow has been doing this for 40 years. And if you
Okay.
go to Sparrow online, they have
Mhm.
digital video recordings, photography, media watch, multilingual collection of projects, stories, and documentation of the women's movement in nearly 14 languages of our country.
Oh, okay.
Some of
Thank
them
you,
are-
ma'am. Thank you for this information. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
And I have just see the chat box. I have shared the that link also. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am,
Thank you.
I just wanted to add that I'm holding in my hands a translation of 4 Tamil feminist poets into English called Wild Words.
Yeah.
You heard of that?
Okay.
But when Malati Maitri and Salma and Kuti Revati and Sugita Rani, they came out with this bomb in 2012, it sort of, completely disturbed the establishment in Tamil Nadu because they even suggested the poets be burnt alive. And
Yeah.
then in 2015, Harper Perennial has come out with an English translation of all their poems, the entire collection of the 4 people. So the other way, it also is very important to bring the works of local, regional feminists to a wider audience when you translate it the other way around, from the local language into English. Thank you.
Thank you. Aparna Lakshmi Ji, would you like to ask your question?
Okay. And I also think that now that this is when after listening to you, this thought suddenly came to me. Now gender studies or women's studies, as it's called in certain places, is now become an academic discipline. But if you look at the list of textbooks that are, I am talking about the situation in Karnataka. If it is otherwise elsewhere, I'm happy. But very, very rarely do you see any Kannada book or any translation of a good English book in Kannada is prescribed. It's again, only a list of those. Even when the syllabus is in Kannada, they prescribe only those texts and not the Kannada books. Now this kind of, I think, is not at all okay. So like, what is we still have not got over that mindset when you think that reading list must contain only known books and not those that are written. So when that is done, I think the younger generation, the students, the research scholars, and of course teachers also will understand how important it is to recognize the work that is done in other languages and other disciplines.
Thank you, ma'am. We have another question from Aparna Lakshmi Ji. Ma'am, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rahmat. Ma'am, does audio-visual material is considered as part of literature or as lived history?
It is
Would
part
it
of
be considered?
lived history is used in the classroom teaching, no? Almost when I was in TISS, every lecture we tried to show a short film or documentary or recitation of poetry or a skit. In fact, the whole one paper, which is a foundation course in TISS, which is called Doing Gender, which you are not talking, you are actually doing gender. So all these methods of communication, they are applied, and they are very effective also, because that's what they say, that one photograph or one powerful poster conveys more than 1,000 words can. No, so it all depends on how, because a lot of thinking and the creative labor goes into it, no, to break out. So it is part of, we always, as Professor Indira Ramarao also said, that it's not only the one method of teaching, no, because there are how do we reach out? Like when we are working with the tribal women, or when we are working with the people who are not accustomed to reading and writing, and still we are reaching out there to them, no? So all these different methods are extremely important to this. It's not only communication only through writing and reading, but communication through your body language, communication through plays, and even acting or speaking with each other. No, they are very important. So in women,
ma'am, I asked this
multiple
because even nowadays, when there is a call for entry or submission anywhere for literary entries and all, it's usually writings which are called for. People do not consider any work done in the oral or video or any such multimedia format.
But it's only for the academic writing, no? Otherwise, you can make your presentation in the class in terms of posters, in terms of poetry, in terms of good translation, essay writing. In fact, this whole study which was done in Maharashtra, where each and every panchayat was sent circular by government to send the essays about women's experiences. The title was "Me Bai Aahe Manun," because I am a woman. And all these essays which were received were analyzed by Professor Vidyut Bhagwat, Director of Women's Studies Center of Pune University. And a big volume came out. It was published by Dandekar School of Political Economy. The overall introduction provided the political economy as aspect of the context of Maharashtra, its economic development and women's predicament. But these essays, they gave the idea of formulation of women's policy, no, Maharashtra state women's policy, because women in a different life situation had a very different kind of challenges and survival struggles and how coping strategies. And so whether women in tribal area or in urban centers, so these essays were very used. The essays was the medium by which this thing, no, or the group stories also, like so many times. Oral history. Yesterday, I think all three speakers spoke about oral history. Even Dr. Leena Pujari told that importance of oral history. Even Professor Indira Ramarao also talked that how stories, how you analyze, critically reflect the stories, not only just narrate the story, but what are the issues that emerge out of that story, and you try to connect it with the larger socioeconomic and cultural context. So context and text, if they are seen in harmony or in a logical way, then you come out with the academic paper. No, that's what I think even Gayatri Spivaka told, Mahashweta Deva's story of Dopdi, how she critically reflected and analyzed in the post-modern framework and provide with the feminist literary criticism of that short story.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Bernadette G, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you, ma'am. Indira ma'am had mentioned about the importance of translations in relation to feminism. So I was reminded as a assistant professor of English literature of a particular text that we dealt with in our general English. And it was a very crucial text when it came to doing it in the classroom. It was titled The Touch. And it was a translation, I think, of Aburi Chaya Devi's original story in another language. So in this context, I would fully agree with Professor Indira Garu that, you know, translations do make a difference, because the essence of the story and the message that the story leaves behind, the impact is really tremendous. And in this connection, I would like to ask Dr. Vibhuti, Professor Vibhuti, about whether there is any specific body that takes care of translations, because it would be a good idea somewhere down the line to have a body that translates feminist texts in all languages. It would be very enlightening for everybody in general, because I do remember the story of the touched me individually, and every student in my class could connect and could relate to it. So in that context, thank you very
I think
much.
one is that Katha is a body which encourages translation. They have a earmark special fund, and Katha is very active, and very important regional language publications have come out in English and vice versa. Officially, if you go Sahitya Academy also sponsors supports translations of poetry as well as essays, as well as literary products and books, novels and short stories. So both
And
are
even this National
government and not.
Translation Mission, which is now a wing
National-
of the Central Institute of Indian Languages,
Yeah, Hyderabad.
is also a major, is a major institution which supports translation across disciplines.
Across disciplines, yeah.
Yeah.
That is Hyderabad, no? CIFL.
So no, not CIFL. Central
No?
Institute of Indian Languages is in Mysore.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yes.
National
They have a
Translation
branch in
Academy is
Pune
in
also. Yeah, in Pune also they have a center. Yes.
yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think we're done with the questions. Thank you, ma'am, for your inspiring and engaging talk with us. We hope to see you at further IMPRI events as well.
Thank you. Pleasure is mine. Thank you.
Now I'm delighted to call upon Dr. Vahida Nainar, independent researcher, gender and human rights consultant, for an address on feminist foreign policy. We welcome you, ma'am. Over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. I must begin by saying that I was invited to be to replace Professor Ms. Irene Santiago, who couldn't make it. So please excuse any shortcomings in this presentation. I'm going to talk about feminist foreign policy, which I have also done previously with IMPRI. I do not have a specific presentation or a PowerPoint, but so I'm going to speak from my short notes. Within the feminist foreign policy, I'm going to talk specifically on the issue of women, peace and security, and trade and economic cooperation. Thank you. So let me start by generally speaking on about foreign policy in general to begin with, and then to contextualize the feminist foreign policy within it. As we know, foreign policy is a mechanism national governments use to guide their diplomatic interactions and relationships with other countries. A state's foreign policy reflects its values and goals and helps drive its political and economic aims in the global arena. Many foreign policies also have a strong focus on national and international security, and it helps determine how a country interacts with international organizations such as the United Nations and citizens of other countries. Foreign policies are developed and influenced by several aspects, some of which being the country's geographical, financial, and political circumstances, the behavior and foreign policies of other countries, the state of international order as to whether there is wars or a situation of unrest, trade alliances to consider, their plans for economic or technological advancements. So all these aspects influence a country's foreign policies generally and a foreign policy with a specific other country. So it is a guide to tackle shared challenges, promote stability, and protect shared interests. For a country's foreign policies typically works along with its domestic policy, which is, of course, another public policy that focuses on domestic issues and matters concerning that are of national interest. So within this context of foreign policy, feminist foreign policy is integration of certain core feminist principles such as intersectionality, commitment for peace, gender nuanced economic development, and integration its foreign policy, and broadly includes the 3 R's. The first is rights, that is recognition and honoring universal human and women's rights to promote women's empowerment and eliminate gender-based violence and discrimination. The second is representation, that is representation of women at all levels of decision-making, public, private, domestic, regional, international, and in all systems, social, political, economic, legal, in a manner that goes beyond symbolicism and rhetoric. And the third is resources, equitable allocation of and equitable access to all kinds of resources to facilitate and ensure gender inclusion. And there are several possibilities and challenges within feminist foreign policies. A foreign policy typically includes state policies on several thematics, national interest, the question of peace and security, the issue of human rights and equality, which is human rights, equality, dignity, including all women, women for religious, ethnic minorities, and other marginalized communities. It includes the thematic of trade and economic cooperation, that is, freedom of trade between countries, particularly for trades that women are engaged in. It concerns thematic of humanitarian emergencies, cooperation between states on humanitarian crisis caused by natural disasters of flood, droughts, hurricane, refugee crisis, earthquakes, etc. It includes guidance on trans-border issues to enhance people-to-people interaction with free movement or soft borders, etc. And the objective broadly is to have a shared understanding of the past. If one is talking about foreign policy of a particular region, people of the region often share a past that is intertwined with commonalities in civilizations, intermingling cultures and identities, faiths, geographies, ethnicity, and language. So exchanges between different groups, youth, women, students, professionals, bureaucrats, business persons, farmers, traders, sports persons, etc., which all helped to break down the shrill jingoistic media and unwanted acrimony in cultural and sports events that in recent times we have seen further alienates the societies. And the other broad thematic of foreign policy is health and climate issues. Climate change related to natural disasters of floods, droughts, green gas emission promotion, what is called the blue economy, which is an economy that seeks to conserve marine and freshwater environments while using them in a sustainable way to develop economic growth and produce resources like energy and food. All these posing, as we speak, further challenges with real risk of interstate and intrastate resource wars and resource access wars. So what a feminist foreign policy will involve not only engendering the policy on all the thematics that I have just spoken about of the policy, but also address the structural issues that maintains gender core on these thematics. So talking about feminist foreign policy today, the focus will be from the various thematics that a foreign policy concerns itself. Two important one is the peace and security, and the second is trade and economic cooperation. Now, first, before we go on the feminist positions on peace, security, and women, it will be important to understand what is the conventional foreign policies, what are the basics of conventional foreign policies on peace and security. So this security, conventionally, security is considered or understood as a prerequisite for peace. Security is understood often of security of the state as opposed to its people, or security of the people is consumed or subsumed within the broad understanding of security of state. The conception of security is often a militaristic protection of borders from real or perceived enemy. And often there is no political will to address the root causes that threaten security, or to address the escalation of militarism within these conventional understanding of peace and security. So the global security system is so structured that it preserves militarism and hegemonic masculinities that reinforce gendered power disparities and exacerbates human insecurity. Within the current militarized masculine international system, actors continue to place state security over human security and rights. Institutions that are designed for preserving international peace and securities, and the leaders occupying these spaces instrumentalize the protection narrative to justify wars or military action. It is, however, crucial to note that militaristic violence often results in exacerbated or increased insecurities for the larger populations generally, but for women specifically. International interventions on conflict resolutions and peace in war zones that claim to empower and protect women often are designed in a way that addresses the symptoms instead of the causes of conflict, which are often inequalities, discrimination, poverty, hunger, disease. So a feminist foreign policy on peace and security understands peace and security, women, peace and security agenda as an intersectional analysis of conflicts. That is, how are these conflicts produced, and understanding the various aspects of conflict. It is based on demilitarization and anti-military politics of peace, with active involvement of women at every stage of conflict resolution and sustainable peace. So that's the broad understanding of feminist foreign policy understanding of women, peace, and security. Towards this, one of the first big breakthrough came in the form of Security Council Resolution 1325, which was an important milestone, but nevertheless fell short of this feminist vision of peace and security agenda. The resolution nevertheless ushered in discussion. It was a breakthrough in that it introduced a discussion about engendering peace processes with participation of women, protection, prevention, relief, and recovery agenda, which has now become a benchmark of state commitment to peace and security. And this resolution is often sought to be implemented through what is called the National Action Plans. So the National Action Plans, what are the successes and challenges of these plans? Countries with ongoing conflicts, or countries that were conflict-ridden in the past, or those dependent on international aid, are the ones that have adopted the national action plans to implement Security Council Resolution 1325. For example, if you give examples of the region, Sri Lanka for a long time resisted despite being a conflict-ridden state or serious conflicts in the past, resisted the adoption of National Action Plan. Nevertheless, the civil society continued to use Resolution 1325 as a tool to identify a set of goals. Women who were not necessarily familiar with the resolution, and nevertheless engaged in community work that promotes the goals of Resolution 1325, offering a bottoms-up implementation of the resolution. Similarly, the women's rights group advocated and achieved like 25% representation of women in local bodies. which as a result of which women's representation rose to 2,000 women over only 82 women, at the local level office. Similarly, similar was the situation in Nepal, which was the first country in the region to recognize, to introduce the National Action Plan, and it's recognized as the most participatory plan. It achieved 33% of women in the Constituent Assembly and gender mainstreaming into policies and programs, which in a number of policies that were introduced subsequently at the end of the conflict. Similarly, Afghanistan made substantial advancement in women's peace and security in the early 20 years, mostly through the activism of women and increased participation in political structures or education system. These are notional successes of the women, peace and security agenda, achieved through the introduction of, particularly of the Resolution 1325. But the challenges of these this women, peace and security through UN's resolution are mainly because of how the peace and security is sought to be implemented falls short from the feminist vision. Basically, the way it falls short is what are also it has come through as the challenges. As first, is that it glosses over the root causes of the conflict. So the UN Security Council Women, Peace, Security Agenda fails to address the structural causes of gender inequality. The institutional inequality and power relations that dominates the UN Security Council remains unchallenged and unexamined. The shortcomings of the resolution and the consequent national action plans fails to generate sustainable and structural transformation. For example, the successes that was achieved in Afghanistan, because it did not address the root causes, was easily subverted as soon as the Taliban came back to power in 2020, and all the gains that were made was lost overnight. So similarly, the National Action Plan itself in the country ties women's protection to respect of family values, and fails to address the protection of women from Taliban's active ostracization of women from public life and depriving them of basic rights. So when a national action plan itself, which is seeking to implement peace and security, women, peace and security agenda, Resolution 1325, incorporates such ideas, it is inevitable that any change that one sees will not necessarily be sustainable. The second challenge is the understanding of security or prioritizing of security over peace, which upholds the fundamental premise of militarism. So the National Action Plan does not address, for example, disarmament, demilitarization, and denuclearization in general, or connect the proliferation of weapons with women's insecurity. So the UN Council's peace and security agenda maintains a militarized and masculine notion of peace and security, and its agenda does not view, for example, a reduction of military expenditure as a tool for securing peace. And many countries in this region of South Asia have higher military spending than they are spending on basic basic education, health, food security, all of which will go a long way to address the root cause of conflict. Then the other challenge is understanding or prioritizing security over rights. Women's rights and human rights are often traded for ceasefire or peace, or holding conflicting parties accountable for disrupting peace and securities. This has also been the experience of women who participate in conflict resolution measures, and they have found consistently that both in the conflict resolution conversations with the international community, they find it very difficult to protect their rights and urge and ensure that they're not traded for peace. Then the other challenge is the symbolic and symptomatic approach. The approach is not holistic. It kind of does not, it supports and separates gender mainstreaming in peace from the overarching pursuit of gender equality. These measures often reaffirms gender stereotype that women are natural peacemaker and engages women to harness their innate proclivity for conflict aversion and contribute to conflict resolution. So the Women, Peace and Security agenda is integrated into the larger security conversation, mainly within the context of women's need of protection. The advancement is often superficial and quantitative on inclusion of women, where the in implementation of the participation agenda, wherever there has been women's participation, these have also often been numerically insignificant. The other challenges of peace and security, women, peace and security from a feminist standpoint is that these matters of peace and security are driven by global geopolitics. The acceptance of Resolution 1325 commitments and adopting the National Action Plan is often a precondition for international aid from other states and foreign donors. So the peace security agenda is often used as a tool to garner global recognition and legitimacy by the conflict countries. So they accept it because it gives them more credibility. It is also used as a bargaining chip in state building processes and peace negotiation, just like where it is as our justification for military action and foreign intervention. For example, the use of US invasion of Afghanistan, when it happened, one of the justifications provided was they were going there to protect women's rights and women's interest. Women's protection of women's rights was used as a pretext for US born in Afghanistan. And yet women's concerns were completely disregarded in the US Taliban negotiations, and which was a huge setback for women's rights. And secondly, the international states and donors incorporate the women, peace, security agenda in their foreign policy, but not in their domestic policy, which has also been identified as a form of neocolonialism. Then coming to the other thematic on trade and economic participation, the idea of this thematic is to enhance women's participation in trade and cooperation, because if one looks at some of the figures in the region, they are and quite low. In South Asia, women has as the second lowest regional female labor force participation rate, which is 22% against 77 for men. It also has the lowest female ownership of firms rate, like 18% versus global average of 34% or 50% in other regions of Latin America and Caribbean. And even like, for example, a connectivity, if one is talking about access to technological technology to use that enhances their participation, economic participation, women are 18 percentage points less likely than men to, for example, own even something as routine as a mobile phone. So the feminist foreign policy on trade and cooperation essentially entail addressing the barriers that exist with regard to women's economic participation. And some of these barriers are education. One is education and skills mismatch. Low literacy, low educational achievement, and practically no skills levels are barriers to women getting valuable and profitable employment and trade opportunities. Similarly, access to assets. Unequal access to productive resources is linked with unequal gains from trade. The lack of land to put down as collateral causes women to miss out on access to finance. And there are several figures with regard to how the countries in the region fare on this count of access to asset. For example, in Bangladesh, 96% of household land is solely owned by men. In India, only 7% and 10% of women in India and Nepal own land. Very few women own farmland, large farmlands, agricultural farmlands in most of the countries in the region. Also, women have low access to agricultural inputs like machineries, fertilization, etc. Access to formal credit also remains very limited. And there's a large gender gap in access to technology, putting women at a disadvantage because the technology is increasingly used for production, training, marketing, banking, and for accessing information. So women are at a disadvantage on all these counts, which affect their economic participation. The other barrier to remove would be institutional barriers, that is laws and policy. Despite expanding efforts to support women's work, laws across the region enabling women's equality, justice, safety remains inadequate. The family laws across the country in the regions have restricted option for women to inherit and own properties and land. The wage gap in many of these countries is wide. Also, the conditions for women workers in several industries in India and other places face gender wage disparities and unfavorable working conditions. The other major barrier is the gender-based violence, which is a major problem in Nepal and is a significant barrier to women's employment. Similarly, in India and Bangladesh, gender-based violence is a serious concern, which determine women's employment choices and deter women from working in paid work. The other factor are the cultural norms. Cultural norms determine whether women can engage in paid work outside home, which is often considered inappropriate. Several employers, for example, in Bangladesh, think that women disrupt the work environment. In India, there is mixed result for women's mobility, and 1/3 of women across India reported, only 1/3 women reported being free to visit certain places. So that is telling about the ability for women's movement outside their home. In terms of social constraints, the burden of housework undermines women's ability to work, and cultural biases discourage women from certain types of work. A significant amount of time women are expected to devote to household duty, which limit their ability to engage in paid work. Ownership and control, again, of assets are limited by inheritance rights, but are mostly determined by cultural norms. Even where there is equal inheritance right, like in India, women are frequently denied these rights by family members. So women's access to asset is largely determined by socio-cultural norms across the countries in the region. To remove the barriers to trade, which would be the feminist foreign policy with regard to trade and economic participation, essentially involves addressing structural issues and root causes of women's unequal social and cultural status. And typically, it would involve eliminating patriarchal notions of gender roles and the dichotomy of the public and private sphere. It would involve removal of restrictions on women's visibility and mobility. It would mean equal access to public spaces and resources. It would also mean right to education of girls and women and skills to adult working women that would enable them to have access to high-paying employment opportunities. It would involve changes in family laws to remove discrimination against women and equality in inheritance and other rights. And all of this would then also involve equal opportunities and access to in employment and trade activities. Because of all these challenges and the barriers that exist, it would seem that feminist foreign policy, would remain a distant dream. Seems like a distant dream because the socio-political realities of several countries today is one of a highly militarized nation state societies that is deeply patriarchal. There is a rise of cultural and political hyper-nationalism. There is role of religion in politics, the intersectional realities of caste, ethnicity, religious, linguistic, sexual minorities, and other unequal status proliferates in the region, and all combined with significantly weakened institutions, or all make a feminist foreign policy a dream or an aspiration to achieve. So achievement of the goals of foreign policy will depend on seizing political windows of opportunities wherever they present itself to achieve incremental advances that would seem quantitative, outward, symbolic, and perhaps symptomatic, but nevertheless are advances towards the goal. But addressing the listed socio-political realities for a complete overhaul of the system would be propelled by really advocacy by women's rights activists, people's movements, civil society mobilization, and struggles of the women's movement from within and outside the socio-political system that exists here. And I think I would end over there and leave it open for discussion on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I would now like to invite Professor Vibhuti Patel ji to give the chair's remarks.
So thank you, Dr. Vahida Nainar, for bringing out this whole journey of women's feminist foreign policy. I think we had a very glorious legacy of a first instance of feminist foreign policy, which was recorded when Dr. Hansa Mehta, an Indian delegate to the United Nations Human Rights Commission, way back in 1947, courageously convinced the world leaders to make amendments in Article 1 of Universal Declaration of Men's Rights. And because of her intervention, it was changed to Universal Declaration of Human Rights, where it was written that all men are born free and equal. From that, the change came that all human beings are born free and equal. But after that, what we have seen that over last couple of 2 decades or so, we can 1325, you told the history of that. But what we see is that feminist foreign policy has been relegated to the margins for in most of the countries, and it is only slowly gaining much deserved recognition. At least now 14 countries have officially adopted feminist foreign policy, only adopted. And as you said, it's still aspirational. Nothing is happening at a ground level. But feminist foreign policy as a tool provides a powerful lens through which we can counter the violent global systems of power that also you give so many examples like patriarchal power, racism, cultural nationalism, imperialism, hypermasculinity or militarism, and that leave majority of the population in perpetual state of vulnerability and despair. So here it is not only women, but all those who are having subordinate position or who are at the margin of the nation state, they suffer because of this kind of jingoism. And feminist foreign policy puts promoting gender equality and women's rights at the center of nation's diplomatic agenda. And you also mentioned that why it is important to continue our efforts, feminist activism, and also civil society organization and other social movements. We have to ally with them. Because now we have a major challenges, as you also brought up, the question of climate change, need for a blue economy, changing the whole this extractive nature of the world capitalism that also needs to be addressed. So it is so earlier we used to say, think globally, act locally. Now the whole climate change discourse has tweaked the slogan, and they said that think globally and solve the problems, think locally. So whatever problems you have locally, whether it is a climate change or a pandemic, but bring the solutions globally. So I think solidarity again becomes very important. Thank you for this very important overview. I think for most of the participants, this must be a really initiation for the understanding of feminist foreign policy.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I would now open the floor to questions. We can start with Bernadette ji.
Ma'am, there seems to be some miscommunication or misunderstanding. I don't have a question as such.
Yeah, your hand is raised.
I'm sorry, that was accidentally.
Yeah.
Then we can move on to Amrita Saikya ji for her question.
Yeah. Hello, ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you for your talk. So my question is, I mean, rather it's a statement and then followed by a question. So it's a truism that women are excluded from the formal peace processes, despite their significant informal contributions at the community level, or the society level. So a very few peace processes like, say, Ireland and Colombia had a few women at the negotiations table. And it's been 24 years since UNSCR 1325, but the success rate in including women is quite demotivating. When the point regarding women's participation in formal peace building is raised, a question often pops up, like how will women's inclusion in formal peace processes change the outcome of those peace processes? Will women bring women being signatories bring about sustainable peace? I would like you to share your thoughts on this. And another part is like, what are your thoughts on the UNSCR 2467, which was brought about in 2019, which shifted the debate to a survivor-centric approach from the WPS agenda, and it has been facing a lot of feminist, criticisms. So I would like you to share your thoughts on these two.
You need to unmute. Yeah. Vedaji, please answer.
Yeah, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you, Amrita, for the question. You are right. There is the requirement resolution states very clearly the participation goal, but one sees very few women participating in formal peace processes, and even when they are participating in peace processes, they find it exceedingly difficult to get their issues placed on the table. Often women have had experiences that they've had to, as I mentioned, trade their rights and their needs and their interest away in the interest of what is otherwise called in the interest of peace, so to speak. So there is very little understanding that what women bring from at the table is really ground level experiences that will go a long way in in understanding the conflict and mitigating its causes and also resolve it in the long run. But there is very little support for that position in the formal peace processes. So in that sense, no, just by women's participation of women signatories signing the peace process itself will not bring the change. It is what the peace process includes or excludes is what will bring a lasting peace or change on the ground. And this has generally been the experience of women who have participated in peace process. On the other hand, where women have had the power to change, if I can give the experience of Liberia, where there is a women president who was part of all these processes, there was significant and very visible changes made in various levels. There were changes in the laws that were made. There was understanding of there was no immunity, for example, provided. If you provide immunity to the ones who were participating in the conflict and were the root causes of the conflict, who have committed crimes during the conflict, there is no way the society will get peace. So that immunity giving was also prevented. So where women have had meaningful participation, that's what I said. It's not participation for the sake of participation or for the sake of symbolism or for the sake of ticking a box that yes, we have done mandatory, but that this has to go beyond symbolism and rhetoric and include the experiences, the needs and interests of women and the marginalized communities, within that conflict situation. It's only that's so when it doesn't address all of these, it will most definitely the peace or will not be sustainable. So I would basically concur to your understanding of it. And with regard to resolution 2467, generally I would say that feminist women's movement are highly critical about shift to this survivor-centric understanding of peace security generally as a whole. But these are all I would say based on the fundamental criticism that feminists have had of the whole women, peace and security agenda, which is how the international community through United Nations understand security. That is understanding, prioritizing security over peace, prioritizing security over rights, prioritizing or introducing measures that are really symptomatic and symbolic rather than addressing root causes. If you're saying that you have to increase the military expenditure and that is going to make you peace and security, in none of the conflict zone there is any experience, and women can testify to that, has an armed man on the street provided security to the people. It in fact actually increases insecurity rather than makes people feel secure. So raising military expenditure is also endorsed by. So the entire system is a little skewed with regard to, not little, but skewed with regard to its understanding of security and peace. And it is all premeditated based on, the war economy, or why there is no condemnation generally of militarism or the raising in a military expenditure, because this is obviously beneficial to certain countries who are, there at the forefront making these decisions. So it is, as I mentioned, also based on the global geopolitics. And it is within these constraints that women have to find small windows of opportunity to work. So it is these factors then that makes it highly difficult. If that answers your question.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Abel Raji, would you like to ask your question?
Ma'am, and you were talking about the challenges. I didn't get the point where you're talking about when you're trying to gender mainstream peace. Women are not natural peacemakers, and conflict aversion is natural to them. Were you saying to say that this is a kind of essentializing that is trying to exploit women? Or I didn't get that point rightly.
Yeah, that's precisely what I'm saying. When the whole understanding of women, peace and security during the discussion of 1325, when that was being discussed, and particularly the 1325 resolution, I was part of some of the coalitions that were discussing and advocating for it at the UN at that time. And the whole understanding is that the reason why they prioritize these 3-4 P's: participation, protection, of women within the 1325, is the understanding is yes, as you put it, essentializing women. That because women are women, they have that innate probability to peace and non-conflict, and therefore we must use women as resource in conflict resolution matters. And when you're talking about protection, it is protection basically of participation of women for protection, but this is protection of other women. It's not protection generally or protection from general sense of insecurity. So women can tell what makes other women insecure and how to prevent, for example, all kinds of gender-based violence. So you protect women to protect other women within conflict situation, rather than participation in overall discussion of root causes of conflict and how to prevent conflict and so on and so forth. So yeah, the whole idea is still, approach is still like in essence essentializing women, despite the fact that throughout conflict zones, you have more and more examples emerging of how women are also part of conflicting armed forces, whether they are armed forces of the LTTE, for example, in Sri Lanka, and several other armed forces of, in African countries or in Latin American countries. You've had women more and more taking up combat roles. And despite all that, experiences, there is still an approach of essentializing women, and that also is a barrier, so if you look at it that way, is what I mentioned.
Thank you, ma'am.
how do you see the role of women in Somalia after the conflict situation? How did they rebuild, and did feminist intervention play a role in shaping the reconstruction of the nation state?
I will not. The Somalian women were definitely active with regard to the peace processes over there. But I cannot say I am knowledgeable so much about this actual achievements of such participation. Generally speaking, I understand that the participation, no matter where women have participated, their participation, it was extremely difficult, to get that participation. While, for example, if you bringing them to the negotiating table, if there is a third country, often this is involved, there is a third country brokering these conversations between the conflicting parties. And when they are bringing these conflicting parties to the table, and it's often the brokering countries that provide the resources to bring them, they often bring the men and they leave out women. And when it is said that these women need to participate because they have been at the forefront of these peace negotiations, they even have turned around and said, sorry, but we don't have resources. So sometimes these women have often raised their own resources to go and sit at the negotiating table. So to that extent, there is that disconnect between what the international community says with regard to participation and what it actually does on the ground. So that is, continues to be an issue. And women in these post-conflict countries where there is resolution are often in the forefront in terms of their advocacy to demand various rights and changes within in laws and policies to make the conflict resolution more sustainable. And there also they have several challenges.
Yeah, but in Somalia, because it matches their participation in public life, is nearly 65% of women, and always compared with the Nordic countries, in terms of human development indicators and gender equality indicators. Yeah, that's
yeah. But I'm not sure the links between that necessarily with the conflict and post-conflict situations as such. But I could say of similar situation in Rwanda. Rwanda, definitely, this is a post-conflict effort by both the post-conflict negotiation peace process resolution as well as the administration that came in after conflict that has very consciously ensured women's participation in public life. And there also they have a high percentage of women in parliament and public life. That I can say that about Rwanda.
Thank you.
Question by anonymous attendee. Can you unmute and speak? Yeah.
Or I can read it out, I think.
Yeah, but who is anonymous? And generally, we always ask participants to identify. Yeah. Okay. The question is important.
So they've asked, how does the adoption and implementation of feminist foreign policies in Latin American nations contribute to transformative changes in foreign policy, considering the distinct historical and contextual background of these countries in the global south, particularly within the framework of the neoliberal world order?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to read just one second.
Yes, I think it's Jagadhatri Singh Ji. I'll just ask her to unmute also.
Yeah, you can speak, unmute and speak.
Okay, now I can read it now. I'm not sure that any of the Latin American countries have feminist foreign policies. Vibhuti, does anybody?
Mexico.
I know
Mexico.
Costa Rica is very
Mexico adopted.
Mexico has adopted.
That has created a major pressure for the other developing countries.
Other developing countries.
Yeah, if they can have, why not? Yeah.
Why not? Yeah, I would not. Mexico does not have the same historical contextual background. For example, like Guatemala or Peru, where they had a significant, left movement and conflict within there. And so the contextual background of each country is different. Mexican foreign policy, the extent to which it has contributed to transformative changes in foreign policy, I cannot say that I'm particularly aware of it. But as I mentioned, the challenges that I stated in my talk, the several challenges that they have stated, I have stated in my talk, that continues to, even if you have adopted the foreign policy, you continue to grapple with those challenges. And it is a work in progress. Even Mexico continues to have challenges with regard to enhancing their participation in workforce, or for example dealing with hyper masculinism. For example, in one particular place in northern Mexico, there is so much of how do you call it, the underground mafia activity going on, that there is the mafia activity which is hyper masculine, in the sense that there is a targeting of women, particularly women who are going to, there's a name for it which I don't recall right now, particularly women who go out to work. And they run a shadow economy in that particular region, and there is tremendous challenge with regard to dealing with such situation in these places. So I will not say that these challenges or barriers have disappeared overnight. I think it's a process that adoption of foreign policy just gives an opening to tackle these barriers, and it makes it easier. It doesn't doesn't mean that these barriers have gone overnight or will go. It will still take a lot of work for these barriers to completely go away and actually achieve the goals of feminist foreign policy.
Thank you, ma'am. We have another question by Amrita ji. Ma'am, would you like to ask your question?
I can read it. Do you want me to answer it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so thanks, Amrita, about that question. Yes, India's stand towards UN Security 1325 yes, I don't think India has shown any commitment to recognizing or implementing Security Council Resolution 1325. In terms of making difference, its acceptance making difference in India internal conflict. I think that it's a long way to go with regard to that. When we are talking of participation, I think it will make a difference, but to the extent that in India, I believe there are no real processes to deal with internal conflicts in the same way that conflicts are dealt with internationally, and I believe there should be. The conflicts are basically, it's a state discussion with the conflicting parties or the outfit that is predominant in the conflict, whether it is a rebel group, it is any other opposing group, and these formal organizations. There is very little participation of even civil society in the negotiation or the resolution of internal conflicts in India. So, I think one has to begin with the inclusion of civil society in the conflict resolution process of internal conflicts in India, and definitely women participating within it in large numbers. Yes, I think it will make, but unfortunately, what is happening is that Security Council 1325 is only understood as a conflict resolution method when it involves, countries, two or more countries, or when there is an international force being involved, international organization participating in the resolution of conflicts. India's position is keeping anything international far away from having anything to do with India. So we have a really long way to go in recognition of several important international, mechanisms, 1325 included.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think there are no more questions. Thank you, ma'am, for sharing your expertise with us through this truly engaging presentation. We hope to see you at further IMPRI events as well. Thank you. Now I would like to call upon Ms. Farida Akhter ji, Executive Director, UBINIG, Policy Research for Development Alternative, and President Nari Grantha Prabandhana, Bangladesh, to give an address on ecofeminism. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Rahmat and Vibhuti ji. Very much, I enjoyed listening to some of you in last 2 days, and so I think it should be part of this. And so my passion for relating to nature and society with my innate feminine passions has always dominated my work and shaped the nature of my organization, UBINIG. It's a policy research organization in Bangladesh. Therefore, I'm active in agriculture, reproductive health, tobacco control movement, human rights, and critical development issues. So my understanding of ecofeminism did not develop as a prefigured theoretical or academic domain, but integral to my practical work. From my own experience, I realized that ecofeminism is by definition a movement or activism that draws values from our ability to challenge and the conventional patriarchal mode of thought and activities critically. One of the central areas of my work in ecological agriculture demands a new way to understand and cultivate relationships with nature, the soil, plants, seeds, and all life forms that squarely brought us into a confrontation with corporate agriculture and industrial food production. That has taught me that ecofeminism as a movement must change the fossil fuel-based industrial civilization and the corporate control of the global economy. The politics of feminist care, conservation, regeneration, and defending the value of all life forms automatically occupied my central theoretical and practical concerns. This is how I arrived at ecofeminism, not from academic theory, but from practice that triggered my urge to theorize. Even when Francois Dubon coined the term in the 70s, it became popular only in the context of numerous protests and activism against environmental destruction. So from the time it became known to the third wave feminists, as you have discussed, last 2 days in different trends of feminism, ecofeminism was already part of the movement. Here I must pay tribute and my deep respect to Professor Mariam is a university professor, an academician, and very much an activist. She passed away on May 15 last year, 2023, at the age 92. Among many other books she has written on feminism, she co-authored the book Ecofeminism with Dr. Vandana Shiva, which I'm sure most of you have read. I have learned a lot from her working methods, and how she connected with theory and practice. She was a dear friend and influenced my work in many different ways. Today, I will present my talk into 2 segments. Part 1, my reading of ecofeminism through the writings of feminist writers and my connection with the ecofeminist practices in Bangladesh. And in the end, I will show some photos, and I hope hope I can do it with a screen sharing. I have closely in the first part, let me talk about the first part. And I start with Maria Mies, and I have known her since 1985 on the global politics of reproductive technologies and population control ideology, with which I shared with Professor Vibhuti Patel also, we worked together. And later I have seen Maria's activism in various environmental movements, particularly after Chernobyl catastrophe in 1986. The Chernobyl catastrophe affected her very much. Besides writing about it in different books and articles, particularly in the ecofeminism book, Maria wrote about this in her latest book, The Village and the World, My Life and Our Times. It was in 2010. She was concerned about the fate of women with small children after the Chernobyl catastrophe. And I quote from her, she says, "Spring has finally come. Everything is green and in blossom. The weather is warm again, but not visible to the eye. Prohibitive signs have been put up everywhere. Don't touch me. I'm contaminated. We can enjoy the trees, the grass, flowers, and salad as voyeurs, and as if the whole were a television program. But we can no longer communicate with nature as living beings." This seemed to be a turning point in Maria's feminist thinking. Similarly, Dr. Vandana Shiva was inspired by the Chipko movement of the forest women and also responded to the Bhopal disaster of Union Carbide's toxic gas release, leading to exposure of 400,000 people and death of 3,000. Much before anybody else, Rachel Carson wrote the groundbreaking book Silent Spring, in which she described elaborately how the chemical DDT, you must know dichloro-diphenyl trichloroethane, was extensively used in gardening and allowed in food production. She said, "To find a diet free from DDT and related chemicals, it seems one must go to the remote and primitive land, still lacking the amenities of civilization. The fact that every meal we eat carries its load of chlorinated hydrocarbons in the inevitable consequence of the almost universal spraying or dusting of agricultural crops with this poison." So these were the issues that they have seen, and they became, wrote about the harmful consequences. But now in late 2023 and early 2024, is still going on, we see another catastrophe before us. This is happening in Palestine. Israel is using white phosphorus in the bomb attacks on Gaza, killing and injuring thousands of civilians, 70% of whom are women and children. You can see this in the international news media, but there is another aspect of occupation and genocide that we often miss. Israel is also destroying the olive trees by uprooting and burning them. Olive is a major agriculture crop for farmers in the West Bank and Gaza. Nearly 50% of the land in these two places is planted with more than 10 million olive trees, mostly native and drought-resilient varieties. This crop is the primary source of income for over 100,000 Palestinian families. Olive trees have been cultivated for many thousands of years. These trees are seen as a significant component of traditional Palestinian farming life, with several generations of families gathering to harvest the olives for 2 months from mid-September, when the attacks started in October. The harvest season is often associated with celebrations. Family and local community celebrations are organized with traditional Palestinian folk music and dancing. With the bombing and uprooting of the olive trees as part of genocide, the Palestinians are severely affected socially and culturally. I just want to take note of this in my talk. The same thing happened in the Ukraine war. destroying the agricultural lands that were producing wheat. Ukraine used to be the breadbasket of Europe. The land is now sold to BlackRock, the giant, and other multinationals like DuPont, Bayer, and Monsanto. These are the major issues for ecofeminists of present day, raising concerns that are usually ignored. Ecofeminism is the most modern trend in feminism that intends to engage and resolve the national, regional, and global problems affecting most people. It incorporates science as well as the traditional knowledge of the communities. Ecofeminism challenges technologies promoted as science to take control of people's lives, mostly women's lives, to institute global corporate governance and massive surveillance by a few corporations. Maria criticized Simone de Beauvoir for her uncritical view of technological progress as an instrument of women's liberation. Simone's idea of emancipation is based on the understanding that women will continue to be excluded from the cultural achievements of the male world until they can control and master their wild sexual cycles, meaning menstruation, conception, pregnancy, and birth. To achieve control, de Beauvoir argued that technical methods and instruments are needed, as well as different relationship between a man and her body, a woman and her body, an instrumental one. She must divide herself into two parts, a controlling and regulating head, the human part and the animal part, that is her lower body. Maria says the worship of such an instrumental approach has taken on increasingly alarming dimensions and dangerous forms, not only among men, but also among women, especially younger women who are unable to accept their bodies as a whole. Maria was also misunderstood by many feminists for her critique of technology and progress, but she did not stop there. She still continued to talk about it, and she even published a brochure called Liberation from Consumption, Ways Towards an Ecological and Feminist Society. Vandana Shiva argues that the marginalization of women and the destruction of biodiversity go hand in hand. She describes the commonality of gendered and environmental oppression and the specific location of women as vulnerable to monoculture capitalism, but also particularly placed to conserve biodiversity. She strongly believes women have a particular link to biodiversity and are the best custodians of the Earth's health through their knowledge and of the heterogeneity of life. Most of you are familiar with her work, so I'm not going into more details of this. Another book, Subsistence Perspective Beyond the Globalized Economy, which Maria co-authored with Veronica Benholt Thompson in 1999, is an important subsistence perspective, is good for the so-called developing countries and classes and equally valid for the so-called developed countries and classes. Two dualistically and hierarchically divided and ordered economies are no longer acceptable. The subsistence perspective, and even Vibhuti mentioned in her talk yesterday, about this importance, developed a powerful critique of the political economy of producing, distributing, and consuming goods and products with the powerful eco-feminist, life-affirming notion of care and regeneration. They argued as activists that the life-affirming principle against the life-annihilating worldview of the modern industrial and capitalist world should be a feminist position. And if we indeed intend to fight against the new capitalist technological world and the web of control over our bodies. She emphasizes, both Maria and Veronica, emphasize recognizing the valuing the unpaid labor and contributions of subsistence activities such as household work, caring for family members, and community-based production. These activities have traditionally been devalued and made invisible within capitalist economies, although they are essential for sustaining life and maintaining social and community relationships. In early 2023, March 2 to 8, I had the opportunity to participate in the event for the preparation of the Eco-Feminist Manifesto titled Making Peace with the Earth through Diversity, Mutuality, Nonviolence, and Care. And it was held at Navdanya Biodiversity Farm, Dehradun. Activists, academicians, environmentalists, food ecologists, consumer club members, and media activists, and most importantly, practitioners of biodiversity-based farming were present. A magnificent journey from east to west and from north to south with women activists rooted in their local environments and concrete ecosystems address critical areas of knowledge, science, and politics in the era of globalization and homogenization of diversity and culture. The manifesto was launched on June 5, 2023 on International Environment Day. This 58-page manifesto stands as a call to action to world leaders, grassroots movement, and international organizations to shift from a paradigm of greed, extractivism, and separation of humanity from nature towards an economy of care, nurturing the ecosystems we depend on, and repairing the damage that we have so far produced. Industrial agriculture's inherent reliance on chemical pesticides, fertilizer, fossil fuels, and monocultures has widely been acknowledged as the most pervasive contributor to ecosystem depletion, biodiversity loss, and greenhouse gas emissions. The Eco-Feminist Manifesto rejected the false narratives of genetically modified crops in the name of feeding the world and reducing pesticide use. The manifesto showed very clearly the attempts to protect biodiversity, farmers' rights, and the sanctity of seeds are being punished by governments that are influenced too heavily by agribusiness lobby. In Mexico, when the government chose to protect biodiversity and health by phasing out GM corn and glyphosate, the government faced potential litigation by the US government on behalf of Bayer Monsanto, but the Mexican government has resisted. Resistance is alive in India, Bangladesh, Europe, and Latin America too, where they are unjust restrictive. There are unjust restrictive seed and food laws, and there have been pushed back by citizens' movement. The manifesto declared that in the struggle for seed freedom and food freedom across the world, we must stand resolute and continue to protect our right to safe and healthy food and seeds. There are two international movements I want to mention, that is FINRAGE and Diverse Women for Diversity, which have been working since 1987 and DWD in 1996. You know, they have been raising at different international forums to discuss this issue. So in the part 2, I will actually talk about our work, but in the beginning of that, I want to say that South Asia region is very rich in eco-feminist thinking, and it goes back thousands of years. Often I feel that when we use terms like ecofeminism, which has essentially been coined in the West, we undermine the history of our feminist knowledge and history. I'm talking about Leelavati, or Khana, as she is commonly known in Bangladesh, India, and Sri Lanka. Khana is a legendary personality in the mythical stories known to the common rural people, especially the farming communities of Bangladesh. She is, I'm sure, in India also. She is also known in other South Asian countries. She was known for her astronomy, meteorology, and day-to-day household affairs knowledge. Her cosmic vision of the universe and agricultural practice was a form of realization of her feminine wisdom. Her utterances, called Khonar Bachon, are mentioned by the rural illiterate people as part of oral culture. Bachons, her verses that she said, Jodi Borshe Magher Shesh, Dhonno Rajar Punno Desh, is commonly known to all, even to the city people. It means sudden rain at the end of Bengali month is Magh now at present, like late January or early February, is good luck for the kingdom and the king. Such rain is good for winter crops, horticulture, and fruit trees. There is more bacterial activity in the soil, making it more fertile. So, Khonar's wisdom here has the link with the state, polity, governance, and livelihood of the people with sun and rain. The cosmic is so procreative and productive. But Khonar's story is very sad also. Khonar was a princess of Lankadip. She was extraordinarily gifted with knowledge and feminist spirituality. After her marriage with Mihir, the son of Pandit Baraho, in the court of King Vikramaditya, Leelavati participated in the king's court with over other wise men. But at one point, her father-in-law felt Leelavati exceeded him in wisdom. According to his order, Leelavati's tongue was cut off to silence her talent. She died because of severe bleeding. Before her death, she told her husband Mihir more verses. Since then, she has been more known as Khonar, and her verses are known as Khonar Bachon, which through the centuries remained as Khonar's advice for agriculture, weather, and day-to-day life affairs. They have acquired the character of an oracle in rural Bengal. The wisdom of Khonar is a brilliant example, the struggle of feminine knowledge and politics in Europe, like witch hunting was there. So now I would like to talk about our work, my connection with ecofeminist practices, which we started in the early 1990s. After a big natural flood disaster, we faced a situation in which small-scale farmers could not afford to continue farming with higher fertilizer cost. Naya Krishi, meaning a new agriculture, is a movement of small farming households in Bangladesh led by female farmers. The movement is critical for reducing food production into industrial fossil fuel-based production systems driven by greed and denial of agriculture and rural lifestyle as a way of life. In the industrial paradigm of technology and production, the earth appears only as a source of raw material and means of production, and hardly a space where human beings share life with all life forms based on biodiverse relations and reciprocal dependence and/or caring. The characteristic feature of industrial civilization is not only the destruction of planet Earth, as we are observing manifestly in climate disaster, the transformation of rural landscapes into a giant dustbin of dumping ground of urban and industrial waste. In Naya Krishi, agriculture is defined as a production system with no concept of waste. Life is, by definition, the highest form of recycling and regenerating. This is the reason Naya Krishi Andolan, for us, it is ecofeminism in practice. Here, seed is the site where life is conserved and reproduced, while political sovereignty is related only to the political realm, and the command and control over seeds include domination over the life processes and cannot be left to the whims of the market and the corporations. Asserting the farmer's sovereignty over seed is the most contested side, not only to defend agriculture from environmental and ecological destruction, but also to protect the process of life without which we cannot exist. Governments talk about the country's sovereignty in a narrow sense of political power. However, the state decisions on anti-farmer agricultural policy and undertakings of steps to destroy the ecology and the environment in support of the profit-oriented ventures of corporations have become a contested issue. Government and international organizations' support for introducing corporate-based seeds threaten Bangladeshi farmers' sovereignty also in other countries. Narkishi farmers have been resisting those efforts and configuring the meaning of sovereignty by which the state must protect, conserve, and reproduce life and the life processes without standing against the ecological culture of the farming communities. The seed sovereignty is directly linked with national sovereignty. See, you know, Naikishi farmer women say that sisters keep seeds in your hand. It's the most popular mobilizing slogan of farmer women. Naikishi Andolon is indeed a women's movement, and women organize themselves through a network called Naikishi Seed Network, and then their responsibility is to ensure collection, conservation, distribution, and enhancement of seeds, germplasm, among the members, primarily women. Naikishi Seed Network builds on farming households, the focal point for in situ and ex situ conservation. Farmers maintain diversity in the field, but at the same time conserve seeds in their homes for several years to be replanted in the coming years. Usually the seeds that are kept for longer periods generally have lower germination rates, but the technology farmers use to preserve seeds is varied and both for short and longer period. Women were and still are very confident about their knowledge and role in seed preservation. This is found among the Naikishi farmer women. They exactly know the characteristics even of those which are endangered and not grown in their area anymore. You know, we found women talking about seeds that are not grown anymore, maybe lost for 10, 20 years, and they call it Ganir Beej or seeds of knowledge. And they believe that if they can describe the seeds, how it looks, how it grows, then it must be available somewhere. And they say that we should look for it. And they also preserve seeds for disasters like of climate change, for example, loss of crops due to flood or drought. So Naikishi farmers are identifying and preserving specific varieties of seeds called disaster management seeds, and in Bangla they call it Durjog Beej, which are flood resistant, drought resistant, cold tolerant, and farmers take up initiatives to support the farmers who are affected by loss of crops. Then Naikishi farmers have been fighting against genetically modified crops like BT, brinjal or eggplant and golden rice. Bangladesh is among the few known countries as the country of origin of brinjals. We have many, many varieties, 247 varieties of brinjals in Bangladesh. And so, but even then, one company is coming and taking our brinjal to genetically modified and patenting Indian name. So Naikishi farmers oppose GMOs because they directly threaten their present practices and interests without offering any agronomic value. Farmers have already demonstrated a better way to enhance both productivity and agrobiodiversity. Another important characteristic of Naikishi is and biodiversity-based farming that it does not depend only on cultivated crops. It encourages the growth of various uncultivated plants and herbs that are good as food sources for humans and animals. The more the environment is free from chemicals, the more uncultivated food are found from the surroundings, and which are good source of food and nutrition for the poor people who don't have land, and also those who are small farmers, they get their food. And in Bangladesh, one cultural practice is very important, that is celebrating Chitra Sankranti. It's the last day of Bengali calendar year, where we have to cook food with at least 14 different leafy greens called shaks. This is a natural auditing that ensures renewable food sources for future. modern agriculture fails to ensure the uncultivated food because of the use of fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides. They use now herbicides to kill all grains except the crop. So these are very dangerous. The availability of uncultivated food indicates future possibilities of food and healthy life. Nainar Krishi also works in the area where tobacco is grown, where environment is destroyed, soil fertility is destroyed, contaminated water, and then we are trying to shift farmers back to food production. So yesterday when Vibhuti was talking, and she said that some people who criticize ecofeminism as romantic, and I would say that if romanticism means preserving life forms and it is life affirming, then such romanticism, I have no problem with that, you know. So let me just share some photos if you allow me. Okay. Can you say it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So this is just to go back to the olive trees in Palestine. You can see that this is really their livelihood and their main farming. And women are very much involved. Can you say it?
Yes, ma'am. Your slides are visible.
Yeah. So women are really harvesting. They harvest it collectively. And you can see it looks like to me like the Chipko woman, you know, hugging the tree and when it is cut by Israeli forces. And so this is a Nainar Krishi village. You know, you can see that all these land is free from chemicals, and women are very much leading this movement, and they are actually, you know, they are able to grow the food that they are pesticides and chemicals. So, and these are the different varieties of seeds that women preserve. And this is an example that in one small place, if the soil is good, then you can have so many different kinds of crops in one small place, you know. So these are the different food crops and seeds of which are preserved by women. And this community seed well center, which is really kept in our center. I invite you to come to our place. And in this center, like there are 2,700 varieties of rice. And this is the slogan called Sisters Keep Seeds in Your Hands. So with this, you know, she will share this with her neighbors, with her relatives and everybody. And so this is very important. And this is woman's knowledge, you know, this woman knows about each and every plant, which has medicinal value, which has food value, which has nutrition value. And this woman knows how much sun is required for drying the seeds for cultivation. And these are uncultivated food, which is grown among the cultivated crops. And this woman is having her sharks, you know, collected. And for that will be her meal that day. And this is the 14 different sharks that are used on Chitra Samradhi. And this is ecofeminism, that is life affirming. And you can see that now we are even losing these bees and, you know, so that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I would now like to call Professor Vibhuti Patel for giving the chair's remarks. Ma'am, you're muted.
Yeah, well, I think Ms. Farida, yours was extremely inspiring, and you have also shown that how in practice these things are happening, and I think it is gaining ground. I think even in India, we have so many feminists who are completely dedicated to similar efforts of creation, and I think organizations such as Seed Savers, or even by the women who have collected a variety of seeds, and it is not for profit, it is for the as you said, seed protection and also protecting the community. And I think your fight against the corporate greed, I think it's extremely commendable. And I think we need to make younger generation more and more active on this issue of, how of the issues which are raised by eco-feminists, or and I think that you have shown that it is, if this is what is romantic, I think we are all for this kind of, and that's what I think one felt. Even I think you were also there when we visited Wangari's green farm, no, the model farm in Kenya. When she started Green Belt movement, people called her romantic, but then farmers were convinced, and what we saw by how the multinational companies were ruining the life of people. I think that is very, and I think some of this mainstream scientists are also now increasingly getting convinced, like Dr. Sundar Surukai or Professor Richaria, who who started Rice Bank with the help of tribal communities in Chhattisgarh. I have met him, and I've also seen, he also showed the way the collection of Chhattisgarh alone, one state had more than 200 varieties of rice. And that diversity is so important. So I think it's very important to take this instead of only the way environmental science books are written. I think it gives this idea that how we need to rewrite these books, no, because it's only talking about waste management, but beyond that, we need to go with that, how reorganization of our society, the goals, even development model is required. The way you connected micro with meso and macro, I think it's very beautifully and so lucid and convincing, no? The illustrations that you gave were excellent. Brilliant. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I would now like to open the floor for questions. Participants can leave it in the Q&A box or use the raise hand feature. Yes. Anisha ji, you can ask your question, please.
Yeah. So, ma'am, thank you for this enlightening lecture. And from your lecture, this is just an observation that I could decipher that we have to re-question the relationship between nature and culture. And also kind of, I feel that we also, the Noya Krishi movement that you spoke about, the woman, you showed the picture of this old woman who knows everything about trees, how much of sun needs to, the tree needs, and every quality to grow a seed. So I, growing up as a child in Calcutta, have never, nurtured a tree with my own hands. So how much we are lacking a relationship with nature, and we need to rebuild it. Even in the context of urban sociology, I think we need to bring in these features, from the movements that have been feminist movements that are forming a path, like leading us, in the rural belt in that way. So I would love to know more about it, like if you want to illustrate more, and thank you so much for this.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Anisha. You look like Bengali.
Yeah, ma'am, I'm a Bengali. Yeah.
Bengali, okay.
আমি বাঙালি ম্যাডাম, আমি বাঙালি, আমি কলকাতাতেই বড়।
কলকাতাতে না, তো আপনি আরো ভালো বুঝবেন। Actually, I wish I could talk about this, taking you back to the places,
Yes.
I don't often like to talk about it sitting in a closed door, room, and because it does not make much sense to me. So you are very right, Anisha, that we have brought ourselves far from nature, and we think that is modernity. And that is something that the more we go out of nature, the more we conquer nature. This is the main language we learned, since our childhood, that if you are educated, if you are modern, if you are more scientific, that means you conquer the nature. How can you conquer the nature? You are part of the nature. And unless you think that you are part of the nature, you cannot really achieve, or you cannot understand. This is how every time I go to the village and talk to these women, this is why I wanted to show the pictures of these women, that this is not my knowledge. Every time I go and I learn from them, because every little thing that they will be able to say that even by listening to the wind, they will say that, no, this time it will be very bad rain, or, rain is coming or not.
Yes.
They can look at the ants and also can say that whether there will be rain or not. So these knowledges are, we are losing this knowledge, and that is a great loss for us. I think the new generation must have an opportunity to learn more by going back to their own villages or to wherever you are very much welcome to come to Bangladesh and in our places. But it is really important. And also, Vibhuti ji, I wanted to mention that, but there is a difference even within the villages. For example, if you go to a modern agricultural village where chemicals are used more, then you will see only monoculture. You will see only one crop all everywhere. But if you go to an ecological agriculture, then you will see the diversity. So the diversity is key to ecofeminism. Is our strength. And also the connection to our nature, connection to our environment is very, very important. So this is what I wanted to add to that. Yes.
Thank you,
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Batulji, would you like to ask your question?
Right. Hello, ma'am. I'm Batul Shafiq, and I'm a student at BITS Law School, Mumbai. So my question to you is that, so I've grown up seeing women participate in traditional agriculture around me, and, women being a very integral part of the cultivating process and everything else. But something that I have noticed is, apart from the domestic duties that a woman has in her own household, she's also, she's also supposed to do duties at the farm, which often go unpaid. And because of this economic gap between a woman's labor and the fruit of the labor that she does after, quite literally do at the end of the day, she's not actually getting the benefits of what she's reaping in, the flowering season, or even just in general. So I just wanted to know your opinion on the fact that does economic stagnation, even in ecofeminism, lead to women not being liberated as, as quickly or as easily as they should? And is economy also a factor that we should look at in ecofeminism?
I think the question assumes a situation. There is like a presumption in the question, because if I look at the context of modern agriculture, actually modern agriculture has segregated the works. This is what men will be doing. This is what women will be doing. And in fact, made women redundant, more or less. They are only allowed to do some work in the field when they are needed, and in the post-harvest work in the house. But the major things, that the seed is not in their control, or the decisions to use whether they will be having this crop or that crop, that is also not in their hands. So, your question of not getting economically recognized is only valid only if women are outside the entire farming framework. But in the ecological agriculture or Naya Krishi, they are very much part of it from the beginning, like what kind of seed will be grown. And, we have to understand one thing very clearly, that our land is not uniform. If you go to a village, there are some land which are a bit higher, some are lower, some are in a bit marshy areas. So women know exactly which seed that she will have to preserve according to the kind of land they have. And men, she will tell her husband that go and sow this seed in your in this land. And also she plans, this is, I have seen in like 300,000 families that are working with us, and they are all coming to us in different meetings, and they are saying that we plan because our daughters are growing up and we will have to get them married, and our son-in-laws will be coming, and we will have to cook pulao for them.
Right.
For that, we will need aromatic variety of rice,
Okay.
which they will not be able to buy from the market, and they will not buy. So that's how they also will grow, even a little bit small, they will do it. Yes, if we talk about modern agricultural framework, if women are only used as not as her decision, only as part of the work, and she's outside of the whole agriculture framework, then she is, of course, discriminated, disregarded, dishonored, and this is, I think she's not empowered. Definitely, that is something that we are concerned about. And so, one quote I have from a farmer woman, she said that modern agriculture brings violence against women,
Right.
disrespect to women, because they are saying that husbands do not feel that they are needed as much as they're like a labor, and for some work that she is a wage labor. And it is true that we have to work we have to advocate for women's recognition, because still farmer means a male man, farmer does
Yes.
not mean a woman.
Yes.
So we have to say woman farmer. Why woman farmer? She is farmer. Man as a man is farmer. So there are some areas that we still need to work on. I'm not saying everything is smooth still. And also I'm saying that her contribution has to be recognized in the national GDP and also in agriculture statistics. So, here I don't want to be romantic about it. I really don't want to be romantic about it. I don't want to be emotional about it. And this is part of our fight, because we are still in the middle of modern agriculture and ecological agriculture, and our capitalist patriarchy is dominating over us. So the fight is not over yet. So Vibhuti, don't get me wrong that I'm taking it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Khushbuji, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, good evening. This is Khushbu Datta. I have my roots in... Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah. I have my roots in Bangladesh, Muktagacha. And my granny was a gynecologist who had the privilege to study that much. I come from a lineage of feminists who bore the brunt of partition. Their perspective has deeply impacted my understanding of women's world. Would love to visit my ancestry in Bangladesh to gain more insights. And I have to share many stories from there because I remember those stories she used to share with me while I was seeing those pictures.
Muktagacha is known for sweets. You know that.
Yeah, I know.
It's very good sweets.
I think IMPRI can organize study tour of Ubinik.
Yes.
Sure.
That's a good idea.
Muktagacha is close to Tangail. So if you come to our place in Tangail,
Yeah, I have my relatives in Dhaka as well. So I'm just planning that I can come because the election was about to begin. So I cannot come there.
Okay, please let me know when you come.
Sure.
Get my address from Vibhuti ji.
Yeah, I have both.
Her
Mobile number
for sure.
Yeah, sure.
Ubinik website is also very lively.
Yeah.
It's a very active website. UBIG, NIG. And I'll share. Yeah, I'll share.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And Bisha ji, would you like to ask your question?
And Vesha ji?
I already asked.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Batul ji, now there's one more person, no, who had raised hand.
I think it's in Visha G only, but I think she's asked her question. I think it must be an
Okay,
accident.
okay. Yeah.
I just want to add very much that in ecofeminism, we have to talk about legendary figures like Kona. This should be very much part of our reading, because we should be proud that we have our roots in feminist thinking.
Are there any films or any this thing? Publications?
You will, if you Google search in the name of Kona or
Her verses are there. Her verses are there.
and some, I think, small documentaries, small things you will find about.
That we can show in a classroom, because now environmental science is a part of a foundation course. It's everywhere. So we talk about Vangari Matai, we talk about this one, Vanda Shiva's work, and we also talk about seed savers. So some of the emulating examples, or even Jehanabad, those women in Bundelkhand, how they have come up with the multi-crop manures of. So that, but I think these are some of these emulating examples, would be very useful. We have one only from Latin America, that is Save Amazon campaign, which sisters had started, Sister Mary.
And in the Ecofeminist Manifesto, when we were doing it, we had people from Mexico and other Latin American countries, from Canada, and almost from 34 different countries. And, everybody had a way of sharing, what they are doing with their local culture and local seeds. And it's fascinating. I really enjoy being in those groups and learning.
And even women in Fiji Islands, they are also so much.
Fiji.
So under the leadership of YWC.
Yeah, and in climate change issue, I think we also have to understand that we have to preserve biodiversity, and this is how we will be able to cope with the climate change challenges posed by climate change. So that's something very important.
Ma'am, I think we have one more question. Raja Ramji, would you like to ask your question?
Yes. I have been joining from yesterday and did not ask any single question. I'll just introduce myself. I'm Rajaram. I'm heading Health and Women Empowerment Vertical in State Bank of India Foundation. Very recently, I got opportunity to lead this vertical. Although I am not certified person, or I don't have any specific training for leading the women empowerment vertical. But since I have joined, I'm learning like anything. Now, Madam Farida has given us the lecture, and I was very keenly observing and listening her. I personally believe that a woman has, from giving birth to an individual. From there, the feminism has started, and connecting with ecology, like the today's topic of Madam, is quite relevant. And the way Madam was relating the things and giving example. In Maharashtra also, there is one lady called Raibai Popeye, known as a Beach Mata. She is working very closely with preserving all these ancient seeds, which gives a lot of values to the human prospects in terms of the uh, protein, or in terms of the quality of the food. And not only that, but again, like saving the things. But it was very heartening and to listen from the Madam that a woman, how these perspectives of changing a mindset of men like us, where Madam is rightly mentioning that still society has been men dominated and fights are going. So I'm learning a lot, Madam. But out of today's this thing, your lecture, I could relate that a woman is the only uh, kind of a individual in the society that they only preserve, and they only can create, they only can nurture, they only can preserve the best thing in the world. That is what I have get out of your lecture. And also, like similar way, as an individual, I feel that okay, fine, one side we are trying to reserve the things, and also the kind of population we are increasing, the way the world is going towards, with huge population and the environmental issues and conflicts and so many things, how we are going to fulfill the needs of food, that is also a concern, where I would love to hear from madam that how, because one side is that okay, fine, we are preserving the things and trying to save our ecology, but other side, the huge pressure of providing quality food to the people is the challenge. So how we can find a middle way? If madam can have a remarks on this, will be very grateful for us also, because many livelihood projects I have been running, many rural development projects. In fact, I would love to highlight one thing, that we have a program for the rural development called Gram Seva, where we are trying to save those local species. Say suppose one village we have adopted, we wanted to set one plant, the identity of the plant. In fact, in our country, in entire Asian region, we have observed that our village names are with the plants name, our village names are with the trees name. So such thing we are trying to preserve, but since the new things, innovation under the name of hybridization, or the what it called,
Genetic
or
modification.
modified crops, GM crops, so such things are emerging. And both the way, I mean, like being human, I always surprised to see how it can be balanced. If madam can highlight on it, even Vibhuti madam, you also can. I'm expecting your comment on this also. Thank you.
Especially a question of population, highly debatable.
Okay, this is the typical question coming from a man. Unfortunately, this happens. Everywhere where we talk about it, the first thing, they say that population is growing. We have so many mouths to feed. So how we are going to feed this, because with this kind of romantic seeds and all these things, you cannot do that. I think, first of all, I think there you are wrong, the way you even put the question. So the question is, can you say that according to FAO, statistics, there are 800 million people are still going to bed without food. So if the entire world is now having industrial food production, and they have done so much, and we have followed green revolution and everything, the hunger problem could not be solved by that. But if you go to the village, they have destroyed the environment where, as I showed the uncultivated food, and there are many things, not only the plants, there are fish and many fruits and everything that is available, and people can find food in there, So how we destroyed the feed of the cows. And now there are no fodder for the cows when we have started doing modern agriculture. Now we cannot even keep a poultry in the house. We have to go to the poultry farm. So industrial food production mentality gives us this problem in a big way, that you cannot feed the population. Remember that people are actually still producing their own food. People are still using their two hands to produce their own food. So you cannot just give a statistics of so many millions of people. In Bangladesh have 170 million people, 17 crore. So that means we do not produce enough for that. We are producing for that. And in the villages, they are using different kinds of food for people. And I think the diversity is very important. So the diversity in the villages, diversity in the hilly areas, and diversity in different areas. Food is also different. And now we are given monoculture production and same kind of food for everyone. And there you will definitely find it difficult to feed people. So I don't see that it is a problem in that way. It has to be planned. It definitely has to be planned. It has to be seen that how we can ensure food for the people by cultivating and by other sources. But this is something that I don't think destroying the environment, destroying our surroundings, destroying our natural habitat, we cannot ensure food for the people. So here I cannot really agree with you, Mr. Rajaram, but I think this question comes on quite often, and we have to face it.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. My question was not to contradict the thing, but I was expecting the middle way, where sometime I also
there is no
I
way. There is.
I also sometime in dilemma that okay, fine, I am going with the ancient old traditional way of
No, this is
sometime
not
we also
ancient.
receive such proposals. They need funding for preserve such things. I also look it in positive way. But sometimes if I see the need of the society, that time it is becoming very contradictory, and it is kind of an ethical dilemma for me, ma'am, to just to think of it, what to do. That is the reason I asked the question.
No, I think there shouldn't be any dilemma, and I think there is no a problem that we cannot just say that okay, we do some in modern way and some in the ecological way. I think we have to change the production system and our first of all our mental mentality of looking at how to solve the problem. And also, I think food is not just a matter of quantity. It has to be, you have to ensure nutrition in it. You have to ensure health part of it. So if people are not healthy and you just feed them with food, which industrial agriculture is doing, it will not help you. So I think this is where I'm just, I don't want to be harsh on you, but I just want to say that please do not be in this dilemma because you can never get out of it. You have to, and also we are not going to ancient agriculture. We cannot even if we want to, we cannot go back. It's not possible. You say we have to, the ecological practices now are very modern and scientific also. It is incorporating all environmental science. It is incorporating also the science that is about plants and meteorology and everything. So it's
even appropriate technology.
Yes,
not
and it is a
anti-technology.
holistic method, so it is not ancient. Even if we want to, we cannot go back to the
Another thing about the population issue.
Yeah.
In India, if we go by, it's 20 states are below stabilization. What do you mean by below stabilization? Couples are producing less than 2 children. So when these couples will die, there'll be less number of people to replace them. So that is one thing, because India's aim was population stability. We are nearing population stabilization, okay? 2.1. Total fertility rate. On an average, how many children a woman in reproductive age from 15 to 49 produces? That is called TFR. And TFR has gone down in 20 states. There are only 300 blocks in the country where women are producing more than 2 children. But the problem is not that. Problem is economic inequality, making investment, human development investment. If your children are going to survive, and if you are sure that they will reach their adulthood and they will not die of any waterborne disease or a vector-borne disease because of the poverty and hunger and deprivation and unsafe environment, then women automatically produce less children. Nobody has to tell me that I should produce less children, because I know if I produce a child, my child is safe.
Yeah.
But when the precarity increases, then you have to, because child is the only investment. We don't have social protection. We don't have social security. We don't have any old age care by the state. that in such circumstances, in a neoliberal context, children are treated as investment by children. You saw after tsunami, what happened? After tsunami, all those coastal areas in which children died the most. Number one was the death of children. After that, it was women, because women did not know swimming and their saris came in the wave. So now they could not swim properly. And after that, when government of the coastal region like Andhra, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu and Kerala, they gave people recanalization operation. And the couples were given, government gave that free recanalization of operations to the coastal communities. But now, after recanalization, when they produce children, now they don't want to go for sterilization, because the fear that another tsunami can again kill their children. So it's a question of how secure you make the life of people, secure in terms of food security, in terms of environmental security, in terms of disease-free life. Because here, I think there is one lady who has written comment that when ethics is that when you give, ethics means adding value to all stakeholders. So why add value only to the capitalists and transnational corporation and multinational corporations and people who are in gated community? Are we providing that kind of adding value to the life? Are we giving better quality of life to people? In the cities, when more than 50% of people in Mumbai are living in informal settlements where they don't get safe drinking water, the toilets are overcrowded, they are not clean, they are in a totally unsafe environment, all the garbage is dumped near that, so the mortality rate of the general population is very high. Leave aside that morbidity is so high. So unless we think of changing this material reality to tell people that it is you producing babies and are increasing demographic investment, this is the logic we were taught in economics, and we debunked it through our this thing and changing the side. So I think this population bomb argument doesn't hold water. Now, even the UN documents, you would not see this kind of argument. Like Wangari Maathai challenged, when she challenged agro-business, she said that hunger is not caused by Africans. There is no population bomb. We have a vast land and we have a very limited population. 500 years of slavery killed all our people. So what are you talking of? That the population is not a problem. It is the faulty economic policy. It is the pressure of the agro-business which completely ruined food security and food sovereignty of Africa. And that is what has created hunger in Africa. No, they called her mad at the time. She was put behind the bar, but then we all prevailed. We also, and she was a botanist. She was not a teacher of botany in Nairobi University. So I think slowly and gradually people are realizing, same in Latin American feminists, they've said, who created this whole narcotics cultivation? Farmers were made to cultivate opium and other narcotics at the gunpoint by CIA. It's the America. It's the arms industry and the drug industry to control the geopolitical this thing. And Latin, after the fear of Chinese Revolution and Vietnam Revolution and one Cuban Revolution, it is the American imperialism which completely ruined the Latin American food sovereignty. So I think we need to connect our problems with this larger political economy issues. And otherwise, we will end up blaming the poor. We will end up victim blaming, no? That you are responsible because you produce babies, no? So that, but now it is not there. In Andhra Pradesh, if you go, poorest of the poor woman would have only 2 children. She's sterilized. By the time she's 21, 22, she's sterilized. Because after 2 children, the state, there are so many incentives and disincentives. So state has very, very ferociously implemented population control policy. And now we see that the situation is, so now you don't have that argument of population bomb, which when I was in college, when I was in school, that was the time it was used. When my younger brother, my mother was pregnant for 3rd time, she wouldn't even come out in the drawing room because of this whole psychophancy of population control that we had through radio and through newspapers and in the classrooms. There was woman was made to feel so guilty for producing more than 1 or 2 children. That scenario is now gone. Women are, and in fact, we have dink families are increasing in India. All these educated women, they are not producing babies. So there are double income, no children couples are increasing within marriage and outside marriage. They are increasing.
Yeah. just one sentence I want to add, Vibhuti, is that we have followed World Bank's prescription of following Green Revolution, with all chemical agriculture, and we have at the same time followed population control program, as you described. But now both failed. So there is no way they can justify anymore that following population policy will help feed the poor. Why is even now who is staying hungry? They are the poor people, and they are making the poor to get sterilized, and the poor are still hungry, and also they are dying of diseases, and even everybody is dying of diseases. So modern agriculture did not get enough food for the poor also, and also poor people were blamed for this. So I think these two things do
and
not...
also the income inequality. Those who, how many millionaire became billionaire even in the midst of pandemic? No, the pandemic profiteers throughout the world, and the income inequality, all the macro studies of world economy are showing that it is, earlier it was 1:50, now it is 1:500. The gap between the poorest and the richest is that. So we don't address those questions. Even that is what we have been telling World Bank and IMF and all, that you just have some human face. Don't talk in the name of stabilization policy, take away whatever little subsistence which poor people are getting. That also should, and these are all kids who we have taught, who are now sitting in World Bank. No, they are the one students of economics who are now in World Bank. And whenever you talk about with the World Bank bosses, they say, ma'am, we have 750 officers only from India. That means it is your economics department who have trained them, and they are talking like that. So I think we need to choose, and you are your heart is at right place. So I think we need to choose. This is the time where we have to choose, take the sides, which side you are in. Are you in favor of, are you with the neoliberal extractivist capitalism, which is totally, it is a completely, they call it zombie because it's a zombie. It damages and runs away, damages and runs away. So you can't even see your enemy, with this whole platform economy and gig job and all. So I think we need to challenge this kind of oppressive forces rather than blaming the poor. If the moment you make human, no woman wants to produce n number of children. She knows how difficult it is to raise children, but it is the kind of circumstances in which the child mortality rate is very high, and living under the extremely oppressive situation, plus not having any say in the conjugal relation. She is not the one who decides whether to use contraceptive or not, how many children to have or not. So empowerment of women also becomes very important. It's much more complex.
Thank you so much.
Good,
Thank you, Madam
Rajaramji,
Vibhuti
you
and
raised
Madam
this
Farida
issue.
for
We
making
needed
this
to discuss this.
clear to me. Thank you so much. And sorry for all attendees who I have stretched this communication up to 17
No, it's
minutes.
very
Thank you so
important.
much.
This is a very, very important issue for macroeconomy and the kind of fiscal monetary policies and the way world economy is shaping. No? So it is very important. Good you brought up this point. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think there are no more questions.
Yeah.
To you for sharing your enlightening and engaging presentation with the participants, and we'll hope to see you at future IMPRI events as well. Thank you.
Yeah.
Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, I would now like to call you for the chair's closing remarks.
Yeah. So I think today was a very mind-blowing session. We had Dr. Indira Ramarao, Dr. Vahida Nainar, and Dr. Farida Akhter. They were so lucid and erudite, and they also made a very well-documented and reflective lecture, feeling so inspired that in the midst of so many multifaceted onslaught that we are facing in our existential struggle, I think this kind of discourses, they make you understand, get the long-term vision. And I think Faridaji nicely said that from conquering nature, the kind of paradigm shift that needs. So Dr. Leena Pujari on day one, she talked about the paradigm shift in thinking because of the feminist theorization and feminist praxis that came over last 60 years. And today, Faridaji also again brought up this question of paradigm shift from conquering nature to living in harmony with nature. So I think it's a very important. Dr. Indira Ramarao's thing of taking feminism to the local community, writing in local language, communicating, using the local idioms and folklores and folk stories and the glorious legacy that we have in of feminist expressions and liberative expressions that we have in our own culture. It's very important. And Vaidaji also said that why incremental advances are important, and we need to acknowledge the incredibly important role of women's movement and also civil society organizations when we want to bring a real change. In the 80s, we talked about think globally, act locally. After that, we said, no, we need to think both globally as well as locally, because if we want to have a transnational feminist solidarity, it is important. And the climate change activists are saying that think locally, because what are your problems? What are the climate? What kind of climatic conditions are creating emergencies and disasters? And find the global solution, because climate is not an issue which is confined to one nation state or the national boundary. Okay, if there is a ozone layer is depleting, or if the carbon footprint is increasing, if the global warming is taking place, if the glaciers are melting, it is going to impact whole planet. So a climate change crisis of immense proportions, which casts its shadow across the globe, impacting every corner of our planet and its inhabitants. I think that is a very important concern of feminist activism. And also the effects are not only born equally. Those who are in the margin of the society, they face far more devastating impact of the climate change. And women, particularly those deeply connected to nature and engaged in subsistence sector. I think Farida ji showed us so many pictures of how women are creating the alternatives, and they are a resilience in the midst of such environmental upheaval. So right from the time of Chipko movement in 1972 to present, so many emulating examples and inspiring examples we have of women's collective efforts. So it is the presentation embarks on a journey to explore crucial intersection of feminist policies and feminist programs and feminist praxis and feminist theorization. I think it must have given you a lot of food for thought, and I think which you would expand the understanding, you would also bring the deeper insights from these 9 lectures that were curated by IMPRI team. Now, women often are the pillars of the communities. I think that's what Farida ji's examples also showed. Women are playing pivotal role in the disaster preparedness, early warning systems, post-disaster rehabilitation, and recognizing the unique vulnerabilities and strength. It's crucial to crafting effective response. And I think that is what feminist theorization and feminist praxis have done. And that is why documenting, sharing, amplifying the voices of small local level struggles and critically reflecting on them and bringing the best practices in our own setup, whether it is your family or community or region, I think is extremely important. That is what we mean by feminist principle of solidarity. Feminists don't believe in a centralized structure. I think yesterday I told you, we believe in respecting each one's specific reality and their responses, and network with each other the way we network from Indian feminist network with feminists from Bangladesh or feminists from Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and come up with the books, stand by each other in the struggle. Currently, Vahida and I think Farida ji also talked about situation in Palestine, that how the agriculture activities of Palestinian women in the subsistence sector and the destruction of olive plants by the Israeli forces. So it is not only, we can't see war in isolation. War also damages the ecosystem. So this kind of interconnections and multiplying the voices of resistance is very important in feminists. So when we talk, why don't we call it practice? We call it praxis, because praxis embeds the theoretical understanding which the collective wisdom of feminism brings it. Whichever school of thought you may be, whichever trend you may find more attractive or more appealing to your head and heart, is a different issue, but we all are together to fight in our fight against the oppressive order. Thank you very much. Thank you, IMPRI team. Thank you, all resource persons.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing your expertise with us over the last 3 days. We will now be having a feedback session. Participants can share their experience by using the raise hand feature. And if they're also allowed to put their video on, so they can do so by letting us know in the chat. Bernadette, would you like to say something?
Have written. They have given feedback. Many of them have written in the chat box. No, Abel Raj, can you unmute and speak? They have written. Many of them have written. Many of them have.
Hello.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Am I audible, please?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, in all my experience about webinars and training sessions and workshops, especially in the online mode, I don't think I have learned as much as I have learned the last 3 days. And one thing that I am really, appreciating about my life is I've chosen to do my PhD on feminism. And I think, every woman who attends a workshop like this should make a conscious decision like this, because according to the mentor who inspired me to take up feminism for my PhD, she told me only one thing. All the books in the world, majority of the books are written by men, for men, of men. Now it's time that women start writing about women. And considering the kind of wonderful people women are, with no strings attached, I think I would like to end with a very important statement saying that there is no way women are trying to show that they are equal to men. I would say that they are really doing much, much more than what men are doing. There's no comparison, but women are definitely, doing the lion's share of everything, whether it is at home or at the workplace. And I think we all should really give a big round of applause for all women in our homes and in our workplaces and in the world at large. I don't know what life would be without women and womenhood. So thank you very much to Professor Vibhuti. You are a mine of information and knowledge, ma'am. I can see the feministic spirit oozing out of you, ma'am. And I'm really so excited to see people like this. Also, I thank all the other speakers for the last 3 days. I think I am an empowered woman because I have taken an entire academic year off just to focus on my PhD work, on my thesis specifically. And I will say that despite the fact that I had a shoulder ligament tear 2 months back, I resumed coming to my reading room to work on my PhD thesis. And I think that's how feminism inspires you. And I really thank all the women in my life who have inspired me, starting from my mother, who brought me into this world. And I have no regrets to be doing a feminist thesis. I have a lot of reverence even for my two, guides who are guiding me, my senior and my junior guide. And I think मेरा जन्म धन्य हो गया है अगर मैं एक फेमिनिज्म के ऊपर थीसिस सक्सेसफुली प्रोड्यूस कर दूं तो थैंक यू वेरी मच।
बर्नाडेट जी, आप क्यों नहीं विभूति मैम को कांटेक्ट करते अपने पीएचडी के लिए? मैम इज वेरी जनरस और आप उनसे फीडबैक लीजिए, वो आपको अच्छे से कनेक्ट करेंगे।
Yeah, I have noted Vibhuti ma'am's email address, WhatsApp number and all. So she will be definitely, a kind of, a mother with a lot of knowledge that I can approach if I need to. And definitely no regrets at all. I'm so happy that, that I'm doing a thesis on feminism. And I wish and pray that as many men realize That women, when they say they are feminists, they're not fighting for equality, but you're fighting for self-respect, for self-esteem, and for self-care, which is a human right of every person. So thank you very much to all the organizers. Thank you, Rahmat Arora, for your patient coordination. Thank you, Vibhuti ma'am, ever available. Thank you, Dr. Leena, and thank you to all the speakers who made it a very enlightening session. I was very privileged to have attended this, and I'm a part-time scholar from Geetham University, Hyderabad. And I think at the age of 52, pursuing a PhD is quite a bit of an inspiration and a lot of motivation for myself too. So thank you to all you
All the best.
Lovely.
All the best. All the best.
Thank you,
Very nice.
Bernadette. It
Excellent.
was very nice having you in our program. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If there is, participants are also requested to kindly fill the feedback form. It has been emailed to you, and I've also shared the link on the chat.
Yeah.
The certificates will be emailed to all participants next week. If there is no more feedback, then I will move on to the vote of thanks.
Yeah,
We are
they have
grateful.
written in the
They
chat
have-
box.
they
Yeah,
have more
all of them
feedback.
have written.
Preeti ji?
And we have a veteran feminist, Preeti Karmarkar. She has been doing excellent work through her plays and music ballets and actual intervention to provide support to women survivor of violence in Pune. Preeti, would you like to speak? Hello, Preeti from Nari Samta Manch. Yeah. They are also into the ecological movement. Preeti, are you there? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Barbara, are you going to speak?
I hope I am audible.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Vibhuti. And I'm so glad to be here because, and thank you, the kind words you said for me. But yes, all the sessions were full of insights. And at present, I'm also pursuing my PhD. And from that point of view, yesterday's session from Professor Saumya Uma was particularly useful for me in a sense that I'm working on sexual harassment at workplace, the act, the POSH Act we commonly refer to. And I'm looking, the possibilities and challenges for the inclusion of the unorganized sector, because unorganized women workers are the most vulnerable, section in our workforce. So from that point of view, and of course, Vibhuti ma'am, the whole, feminist discourse, I mean, the whole thing you presented yesterday was really full of insights, and that presented a historical view of what feminist, where from where we have come and what legacy we have as feminist activists. So that was really important. And yes, I'm glad, and this will be certainly helpful for me in my journey of PhD. Thank you so much.
Coming from you, I'm really humbled and feel honored because I've always respected your work and Nari Samta Manch.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Those who wish to share their feedback can.
Could I come in?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Very much, ma'am. It has been really wonderful experience as I have been trying to pursue my postdoctorate in the same field. So it has been really, really enriching experience, and who have tried to cover all the facets that this is definitely going to help me in my future journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vahida.
Okay. Yeah. I'm Barbara. Yesterday I couldn't come on the audio, but now I hope I'm audible now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm very grateful to the organizers for thinking about us and for having organized this winter school. Actually, I have taken interest in feminism, ecofeminism, eco-criticism, maybe 2 years back. I've been reading a number of books, and I've also presented small papers and all that. Then I was, all the sessions were really useful for me, but I was really happy to get to know about intersectionality because that area was quite a blur to me. And today, listening to the last speaker, Miss Farida Akhter from Bangladesh. I was really happy because last year I happened to visit Bangladesh in the month of September. I'm a scheduled tribe from Northeast, from Meghalaya. And then a number of our, Meghalaya is, a number of our people are also there in Bangladesh. So we got to know them, we got to know about their life and all that. And then added to that, I also belong to a matrilineal society where the property and the name passes through the mother's lineage. And it is also, our tribe is also avuncular. So a lot of issues are there, which did not fit into many of the sessions or many of the inputs that were there. But then I understood that it is feminism is all about intersectionality. Then now I feel like even though I may not be able to do much, but then I feel there is a lot to do in terms of Northeast feminism coming from matrilineal society. Maybe I can look at feminism from my point of view, all that. So I thank IMPRI from the bottom of my heart. And if in future, if there is any other session of this kind, one I already saw in Facebook, which may not be very relevant to me, so I let it pass. But if at all in the future, anything on feminism, on culture, on literature, on translation, I would very much like to be part of it. Thank you so much on behalf of the people here also, because I definitely will be sharing the inputs that I have received. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is Anvesha Bhattacharya. Thank you, Professor Patel. Thank you, Rahmat, for coordinating so well to all the respected professors and speakers. And when you're doing your PhD, it's all about library work and reading. But when you get to hear the speakers and they feel like classroom lectures, and they motivate you a lot. And Professor Vibhuti Patel, and after seeing you, I really need to read a lot, because I can't believe you, like the knowledge you have and the initiative and motivation you have to share it with people. Thank you so much. Thank you, IMPRI. Look forward to more such sessions like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Anvesha.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Professor Vibhuti Patel, ma'am. I am Sarita Bag. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, you are.
Okay, ma'am, actually, I'm from political science department. I'm a PhD research scholar from CPS JNU, and now I'm faculty in Kalahandi University, Bhawanipatna, Odisha. Ma'am, actually, I don't have much knowledge on feminism, and my topic is I'm working on political leadership. But while doing my PhD work, later on, I developed my interest in women political leadership. So when I saw this feminism, praxis, and all this, actually I got interest to know more about. So really it is very inspiring. In 3 days I have learned many things, and in future also, if there will be session like women leadership or political leadership, then definitely I'll join, ma'am. Thank you so much. Really, I am indebted to all resource persons. It is really wonderful session. Thank you so much, ma'am.
All the best for your PhD, all the scholars who spoke. Yeah, the
Thank
best
you, ma'am.
wishes from us. Yeah.
Namaste, ma'am.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, am I audible, ma'am? Yes, I'm Saumya, research scholar from Bangalore University. I'm working on motherhood alienation as well as postpartum depression in contemporary autobiographies, ma'am. So I think you have created a wonderful platform, so wherein it has enlightened us very much, ma'am. Thank you very much. And looking at you, I realized how you have played a role like a knowledge is a power. I think as a feminist, we as a like researchers, we have to imbibe the nature you have, ma'am. Seriously, I mean, you have well read. You remember everything. The way you were presenting, it was a kind of impressive, ma'am. I think as a future even I'm planning to get into the teaching sector, so I want to be like you, ma'am. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for inviting all the great speakers and the scholars around the world. They were really helpful for us, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be humble. Yeah.
Shivani ji, would you like to?
Is it me?
Yes, yes, your hand is raised.
Thank you, Rahmat. And thank you, Vibhuti ma'am, for letting me know about the other resource persons, eminent resource person, and coming to know about their work and their lucid way of explaining. There was one area which I'm quite intrigued always when I read about feminism, and there was once a conference I attended and a paper. So I was also thinking through this 3-day session about that how women are relegated to certain spaces. And we understand that they are, because of their role segregation, they are mostly seen in their domestic life and they are visualized in their homes. But in contemporary times where women have started and where women are spread in offices and even the youngsters, we see most of the females relegated to certain spaces, say in educational institutions, where they are safe and they try to avoid certain spaces which are considered as unsafe. So women and spaces, this theme was constantly running in my mind when I was listening to so many respectable speakers. And yes, Vibhuti ma'am is always very inspiring. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Amrita ji, would you like to say something?
Yeah, thank you, IMPRI team, and especially Professor Vibhuti for organizing this online course. All the lectures were very informative and enlightening. I will definitely carry the learnings from the lectures further in life. And, I have accrued a lot of knowledge, which I'm surely going to use in my current research also. I look forward to other invigorating lectures by IMPRI in the future. I would like to ask if I can reach out to the speakers with other questions that I have.
Yeah.
And also, I would like to know your policy of citing or, using extracts from the lectures in our own research. So I'd like to know a little bit, how do we cite them?
Because
If you can tell, yeah.
first of all the lectures will be there in the IMPRI's in terms of report. And later on, it may come out in a book form. Everything is public domain. You can even download them.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, the previous course is there. Yeah, it takes around 2-3 months. But even
Right.
the lectures within a week, they will be there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
The links are shared by IMPRI.
And she was asking about
Videos
how
are
to
shared.
cite. I think she was asking about how to cite. So you can just talk about this IMPRI lecture series and the session, and you can use that.
Okay, thank you so much.
A link also on the day you access.
Right.
Yes, the link for the videos the meetings will be shared with you, and you can access the session reports after the
Right.
2 weeks from now.
Within 2 weeks.
Sharon ji, would you like to say something? Your video has been on.
Me?
Yeah, with you, turn your video on.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. I went back to university today and I was telling everybody about Professor Vibhuti Patel. And she's a very familiar name in my department. And I want to say, ma'am, that you're a treasure for gender studies students. And I wish I found this workshop when I was doing my coursework, because I come from a media background, and it's my first time in gender studies. And the way you've explained the trends in feminism, I wish I could go rewrite my coursework exam. So thank you for that. And I also would like to thank Dr. Leena Pujari. I learned so much from your lecture. And I think it was one of the first lectures that I've written so many notes. So thank you. And I would like to thank your organization, IMPRI, for this wonderful session. And it was so professionally organized. And I would really like to join further workshops to improve my knowledge, because I believe that we're never too old to learn. And I wish everyone good luck with their research, and I hope that we can make more meaningful research that will contribute, because as we spoke in the last 2 days, that fighting patriarchy is such a exhausting task. And I hope that we be the generation that sees the end to it. And I hope that our research does contribute towards that. So thank you, guys.
Which university you are in?
Ma'am, I'm in Bangalore University. I'm guided by Dr. Sudeshna Mukherjee.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm researching cyber crimes against women. I'm doing a comparative study between my home country, South Africa, and India.
Oh, so Sudeshna is your guide.
Yes.
Oh, she's okay, a friend of mine.
Yeah,
she's
she's good.
also a friend of ours. Yeah. And Dr. Indira Ramarao is also in your
Yes, I'm also
Professor
familiar with
Emeritus.
She's also a treasure for gender studies students.
Thank you so much. Thank you. There are a lot of positive feedback in the chat box. Thank you, Ingrid ji, Aparna ji, and Anita ji, and many others, Ramisha ji, who shared their positive feedback. And yes, thank you, ma'am. We have several cutting-edge policy and relevant workshops planned ahead with under the chairship and directorship of Professor Vibhuti ji. And so do check out our website for any future events planned and register and share the word. For being a catalyst to make change and contribute to policy research ahead. Thank you so much. Yes, we're truly grateful to all who've been part of today's event. As we come to an end of day 3 of Feminism, Theory and Praxis, an online international winter school program, a 3-day immersive online certificate training course, I, Remat Arora, at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose a formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI Gender Impact Studies Center, New Delhi. We are grateful to all our experts for day 3, Professor Indira Ramarao ji, Dr. Vahida Nainar ji, Ms. Farida Akhter ji, for taking out their valuable time and giving an opportunity to the participants to learn from this online certificate program. We thank all our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. Readings for the session have been shared in all your emails, and the videos will also be shared soon. There are a lot of more positive feedback coming up on the chat, so I would just like to thank Preeti ji and Sharon ji for their feedback. We are grateful if you're watching us later on YouTube or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. We hope you continue to join in future to our IMPRI Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning. Wishing you a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Kindly also tell about feedback form and certificates.
Yes, the feedback form has been emailed to all of you, and please fill it in, and I've also mentioned it in the chat, and the certificates will be sent out by next week.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Increase
a lot.
Lovely sessions, and hats off to IMPRI and Dr. Vibhuti Patel for these wonderful, wonderful sessions. Really, even we get to learn. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Good night.